Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel and welcome to my Omnibus series. I've got so many of these omnibuses that are going to come out so that you'll be able to listen to an hour's worth of stories, which I know you're going to love. You know, the thing is that telling stories is such a fine art, and it's something that was practiced hundreds of years ago when people didn't have the technology that we have today. And everyone would gather around the fire and listen to a wonderful story. And also, what is so wonderful about a story is that personally, I think it is the best way to go to sleep. Every night when I go to bed, I always listen to stories. And that's something that parents used to do with their children. It's something that they still do with their children. There's nothing better than a good story. And so I hope you're going to enjoy this series. And before we start, I just want to say, do subscribe to my channel because you don't want to miss out on anything. Because I'm in for the long haul and I want to make sure that you get the most stunning stories to go to bed with at night or to listen to when you want to be one of those people sitting beside the fire and listening. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and let's get started. I hope you're going to enjoy the omnibus.
Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, she's completely clueless. She has no idea what is lurking in the dark shadows, clandestinely scrutinizing her every move and following her around very cautiously like a ghost. I know so much about her, yet the irony of ironies is she knows nothing about me. As far as she knows, I don't even exist. But that will soon quickly change on the 1-hour train journey from New York to Hackensack this afternoon. Indeed, after she encounters me, I very much doubt she will ever forget me. Some people you meet leave an indelible imprint on your life, do they not? But let's face it, how many of us actually remember what we ate for dinner last Tuesday night? Or who sat opposite us on a train or bus journey that we took 2 years ago? You don't remember those intrinsic details at all. Or your brain would be storing up a lot of completely useless information that has no impact on your life whatsoever, which is why we only remember the things that make an impression on us. To all intents and purposes, it's safe to say, in her case, she will always remember me, the man who crossed her path in less than auspicious circumstances. Let's face it, you don't forget a grand entrance like that, no matter how much you might wish to erase or even obliterate the memory from your mind, as nasty, gunky things have a way of sticking fast to you, and letting them go is never easy. So let's just say, I'm reasonably confident that she will never forget me. I'm biding my time, of course, waiting for the perfect moment or opportunity when my script to this story will unfold and finally be played. I will play my part to the very best of my ability. Let's just say I've already rehearsed my lines, and I can only hope that things will go as seamlessly as I anticipate they will. But I have thought about how I should react in all manner of scenarios, so I prepared myself for the very worst. But I predict that things will go to my favor today. As I glance in her direction, she scurries along the pavement. She's on her way to Grand Central train station, moving very quickly as she always does. She's as predictable as the weather. I pretty much know everything about her, almost as if she was an open book. It's amazing what you can glean from a single person by just studying them intensely. For the last couple of weeks, this woman has pretty much been the subject that has consumed my entire focus. For very good reason, of course. She always seems to be in a tearing hurry, moving fast whenever she walks, like a lot of people tend to do in this part of New York. So many people in this big, bustling, booming city always seem to be rushing, as if they're living on their adrenaline. You only have to glance down the street to see the resolute determination on people's faces as they make their way steadily to work. In her case, she marches down the street while swinging her arms and legs, almost as if she's power walking. I read somewhere that people who walk very fast are happier than those who waddle down the road at a snail's pace. I acquired some of this rather useless information while in prison, because with so many hours of the day left to idle away doing practically nothing, one needs to fill that time, and why not fill it with trivia? In truth, I wouldn't say that this woman's fast pace of walking reflects a peaceful state of mind. On the contrary, at a swift glance of her, I would be bold enough to say she's definitely not deliriously happy. She wears the weight of responsibility on her narrow shoulders, like someone who doesn't find life terribly easy. And I don't expect in her case she does. Indeed, I think half the people in New York, running around this metropolis like frantic hamsters on a treadmill, don't walk fast because they actually want to. It's more a case of being terribly afraid of being late for a conference or a meeting. Me, I'm soaking it all up, wallowing in the vibe of this city, and very glad that I don't have to be part of the spirited energy. I don't get why anyone would commute to New York every day, but hats off to her for doing it. I get why she lives in Hackensack. The accommodation is naturally affordable. The town in Bergen County, northeastern New Jersey, boasts excellent schools, shopping malls, and multiple highways. With such good bus routes to New York, I'm rather surprised the woman doesn't take the bus. But it suits me fine that she prefers to commute from Hackensack to Grand Central by train. The woman I'm choosing to follow is called Claudia Hansen. Her father, I believe, was originally from Frankfurt in Germany. Her mother is from Manhattan in New York, so she was raised in New York before her parents returned to Germany, where they currently now reside, upon her father's insistence, who was champing at the bit to return to his hometown of Breckensheim. I guess the surname Handsome points to her Germanic roots. Claudia, I understand, can speak fluent German, courtesy of her father, and her language is needed for her job, I believe, where she regularly takes international calls from German customers. She works for a German organization called Lambrung, and is on the advertising team responsible with promoting sports products and health gimmicks to improve your athletic performances. Well, the performances of aspiring athletes, I imagine, and people interested in the great outdoors, so to speak. She works in one of the tower blocks in Midtown in Park Avenue, leaves the offices at exactly 12:10 at lunch to pick up a sandwich from a coffee shop called the Blue Witch. A funny name for a coffee shop, if you ask me. But on the glass window pane are the words bedazzled and bewitched, so I guess they're rather describing the coffees like that. Almost as if to suggest once you've had one of their coffees from the Blue Witch, you'll come under the Blue Witch's magic spell and be addicted to their coffees for the rest of your life. I had a coffee there the other day, but I can't say it was the best coffee I've ever tasted in New York. But the coffee shop does appear to have a booming trade, with hungry commuters picking up a cinnamon bun, donut or sandwich and coffee to go, to take back to the office with them. I understand the coffee shop came into being after the first Harry Potter book came into production. So I suppose names like the Blue Witch were pretty hip back then. I know exactly what this woman will order for her lunch. Yes, she's pretty non-adventurous, I'm afraid to say. She alternates with avocado and ham, tuna, mayonnaise, and chicken and sweet corn. Always eaten on granary bread, I notice, and served with a Blue Witch pumpkin latte, so she must have rather a sweet tooth on her. In the morning, after she gets off the train at Grand Central, she always picks up a hot chocolate from the Blue Witch, along with a blueberry muffin. I knew when she left for work, she'd get the 16:45 train to get back home, and the journey is an hour long, well, an hour and 11 minutes to be exact. I know exactly where she sits on the train. Every single morning and late afternoon, she manages to get the very same seat like clockwork. Everything about this 42-year-old woman is wonderfully predictable, and predictability makes my life so much easier. It would be a lot more complicated for me if she wasn't reliable. But reliable is her second name, it would appear. so I can pretty much predict her movements for an entire day, almost as if studying a map of the Big Apple that remains steadfastly the same. Ostensibly, she knows exactly where to stand on the station platform at Grand Central to access the seat she wants, which she grabs as fast as she can when the train doors slide open. She likes the seat at the far end of the carriage, with a table so she can pull out her laptop and tap away on the keyboard to her heart's content. And once Claudia Hansen gets stuck into her writing, she tunes the whole world out, as so attentive is her focus. You've got to admire that, haven't you? She fails to hear someone sneezing a few seats down, or two sisters arguing about who should sit next to the window further down the carriage. There are times on the train that I have sat very close to Claudia Hansen, shielding my eyes behind a pair of dark glasses and burying myself behind my cell phone, like so many commuters on this train. Claudia Hansen rather fancies herself as the next aspiring Harry Potter children's author. Let's not kid. She's got big dreams for herself. I suppose I rather admire her for that. But let's just say such dreams are pie in the sky, are they not? They are in no way realistic by any manner of means. The sad truth is pretty grim. By all accounts, very few children's authors will ever get the notoriety or success of J.K. Rowling. But I suppose the woman can dream. Nothing wrong with that. When it comes to myself, I'm extremely practical. Let's just say, for me, dreams I will never embrace, because life is not like that. It's not airy-fairy. I like scrupulously cold, hard facts. Those are the only things that are reliable and going to naturally advance my life and help me to succeed in all my ambitious endeavours. Dreams will take you on a road to nowhere, unless, of course, you're extremely lucky. But I don't get this distinct impression that Claudia Hansen is terribly lucky. If that indeed were the case, I wouldn't be stalking her like a coyote after its prey. And by the time I've finished with her, her pockets will be significantly lighter. I don't live in a fairy tale world, but a ruthlessly realistic one. And my stint in prison for assault, when I beat a man almost to death, when I realized he'd been having it off with my girlfriend, I guess I just lost it. I was so angry with him. I mean, can any man blame me for that? I think not. I caught the two of them together, canoodling in my girlfriend's car. I gave him chase, and when he tried to run off, I ran right after him. Unfortunately, it was in a public place, where spectators watched the whole thing unfold. I tried to beat this guy's brains out, and the man kept saying to me that my girlfriend had initiated everything. But that made me all the more mad, and my fists even more powerful. Before I knew it, I'd been cuffed and arrested by the police. Thankfully, the guy I almost throttled to death never died, or I might have faced a murder charge. I did end up breaking his nose and fracturing 3 of his ribs, but I wasn't sorry for what I did. Let's just say being in prison has sharpened my skills exponentially. I've learnt a few tricks along the way. When you're living among some aggressive inmates that have actually murdered people, sometimes in cold blood, you glean quite a lot of pointers from these people. And you also learn about the mistakes that led to their incarceration in the first place. So you soon learn what not to do. And there are a lot of good lessons to be learned from people's mistakes. Let me tell you that. When you come out of prison, one thing you want for sure is to never return to that dreadful dump again. And if you have your wits about you, and are shrewd enough, there is no reason you ever will. Providing, of course, you're saliently clever. I wasn't terribly clever when I beat the man that was cheating with my girlfriend up in a public place. But I learnt some invaluable lessons in the process. And now I've realized that being cloak and dagger about things and cunning like a fox is the best way to get ahead in the world of crime. I intend to use these sharpened skills I acquired in prison to the very best of my ability, which is why my eyes are on the prize when it comes to Claudia Hanson. It's nothing personal, of course. It is what it is. Like any man who needs a financial windfall, I am no different. I want to make a living, but not the honest way. No, that's too much like hard work. It's so much easier to take exactly what you need in this dog-eat-dog world of ours. I don't want to be like Claudia Hanson herself, living like a hamster on a treadmill, getting up early and commuting to work day after day so drudgerously. No, that's not the life for me. I understand Claudia Hanson is eager to give up her job at Lebrun and is planning to become a children's author full-time. But you can't do that, can you, without significant money behind you? Yes, you've guessed it. Claudia Hanson has a little nest egg tucked away, but not in the bank as you might suppose. She has put a stack of cash away in a safe, a locked safe, of course, in her apartment. I intend to get my hands on all that money, and so that's pretty much why I've been following my mark around, to learn as much about her as I possibly can. And then I will strike when the time is right, or when the iron is hot, so to speak. Claudia Hanson is a single mother. She has a 16-year-old daughter called Courtney, with father unknown. I suppose the poor girl came into this life as a result of a one-night stand, and the mother, probably half-cut at the time, did not know who the father was. You hear stories like that all the time. Women getting brazenly drunk and letting go of all their inhibitions like a balloon on the wind. And the next thing you know, they discover that they've gotten themselves pregnant. Thank God I'm not a woman. I wouldn't like to be faced with such a problem. Life is hard enough, is it not? I imagine the man in question just slipped away like the morning dew, never to be seen or heard from again, and probably has no idea he's actually fathered a little girl. Well, a teenage girl by now. It can't be easy to raise a young girl all on your own, without a father figure around. So you've got to admire Claudia Hanson for single-handedly raising her child, although according to my 18-year-old brother Keegan, Courtney is a little flaky, callow and extremely naive. He's told her he loves her to keep her sweet, and she's fallen for his affections hook, line and sinker, so much so that I almost feel sorry for the poor mite. Perhaps after she wakes up to the cruel reality of what her wagging tongue has brought about in her life, she may begin to finally grow up, and to learn that telling a complete stranger there is a safe in your house containing over $40,000 may not be a very good idea. I persuaded my brother Keegan to keep Courtney as malleable as plasticine. She's going to be very useful to us when needs must, because Courtney is the negotiation I will studiously employ with a Machiavellian brilliance and wit to make Claudia Hanson purge out the numbers of her safe, so she'll practically be begging us to take her nest egg. Ostensibly like so many long-suffering mothers, Claudia Hanson has a slightly tempestuous relationship with her teenage daughter, who during the summer holidays, while her mother is working in New York, has been a rather naughty little minx, shall we say. While her mother thinks her daughter's been a good girl, staying at home, watching Netflix, and keeping in touch with some of her friends on Instagram. She couldn't be more wrong about that. Let's just say when Claudia's back is turned, she is blindly oblivious to what is going on under her very nose, for there is no telling what her 16-year-old daughter Courtney is really getting up to while she's at work. It would seem the sweet little Courtney has a very keen eye for the boys. Many girls her age are boy crazy, are they not? They just can't help themselves. If Claudia had any idea that her daughter was canoodling with my brother, she would be less than amused. She has told her daughter in no uncertain terms that she's far too young to have a boyfriend. They say when the cat's away, the mice do play. And what self-respecting young teenager is actually ever going to listen to their mother's advice? Keegan has only been interested in Courtney for a little illicit canoodle, As with his raging, rather rampant teenage hormones, commitment of any kind is the last thing on his young mind. He's happy for girls to come and go into his life, like the different flavours of ice cream you get from the parlour. For my brother can never stick to one flavour, because he likes them all. When Courtney brought him back to her mother's apartment at lunchtime, after meeting him at the mall, she would have never seen my brother for dust again, if she hadn't happened to let slip rather nonchalantly that her mother keeps $40,000 in her safe. Keegan's antennae were titillated and began to wag at the sound of $40,000. I mean, can you blame him for that? By all accounts, for anyone that is permanently skint like my brother always is, 40,000 is like receiving the gold ticket, like the little boy Charlie in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I mean, who wants to look a gift horse in the mouth? It's like watching a machine in the casino, purging out hundreds and hundreds of coins, and you're telling me you're going to walk away and ignore all the inviting money that is spilled out in front of you. My rather dithery brother Keegan knew he needed to keep Courtney as sweet as a pig in clover, while he told me about the $40,000 treasure trove waiting for us in a safe in Claudia Hanson's apartment, that cannot be easily accessed without the code that only Claudia herself actually knows. Your mother keeps $40,000 in this apartment? My brother asked her incredulously. Why doesn't she use a bank like most people do?
She does have a bank account, but she draws out a lot of money from it, storing it here at home. She doesn't trust the banks as far as you can throw them. She was scammed once, you see, by a horrible boyfriend of hers. That boyfriend got her bank details, transferring her funds into his own account. The bank pretty much didn't redeem the situation for my mother. They said it was a legitimate transaction, and if she had allowed her boyfriend to get her bank details, it was all her fault. Her boyfriend claimed that she had willingly transferred her money into his account. So ever since that debacle, and the bank refusing to help my mother out, she's pretty much grown wary of banks. She's got a bank account, of course, but she's always drawing out cash to keep here at home, in the safe.
Sounds like she's had a loser boyfriend, backstabbing her like that.
He was a loser. My mother has lousy taste in men, and let's just say Tony was always skint. My mother would lend him so much money, and she never ever knew what he spent it on. She thinks he might have had an addiction, a gambling addiction perhaps, but she couldn't be sure about that because she didn't really know much about Tony.
So she keeps $40,000 in her safe, does she? Because of one bad experience with the bank?
Pretty much. I've tried to open the safe myself on many occasions, said Courtney, to help myself to some of her cash. But I've tried all our birthdays and stuff like that. The safe stubbornly does not oblige me. My mother's rarely mean. She refuses to give me any money. While she's at work, I'm stuck here all on my own. What does she expect me to do all day, without any spending money at my disposal? It would be nice to do a bit of shopping, buy a few nice things, and even go away for a week or so with one of my girlfriends. She could have given me money to have fun, but my mother is so thrifty, always intent on saving money whenever possible, because she wants to give up her job at Lebrun where she works and focus on her writing career.
Writing career, you say? Said my brother, sounding impressed. Your mother's an author, is she?
Not exactly, said Courtney. More likely she fancies herself as one. She wants to be like J.K. Rowling and write a children's book to set the world alight, to make us millions, I suspect.
Do you think she will succeed in her goals?
Of course not, said Courtney. How many authors will ever end up like J.K. Rowling? That woman got very lucky, and she was talented, and I dare say that helped a bit.
Maybe your mother's talented too. What is her writing like?
I'm not sure, said Courtney, making a face. I've never read her stuff. I have no interest in reading it either. Honestly, I can't imagine my mother writing a story. I just can't.
My brother found this statement rather astonishing, for you would have thought Courtney would have feigned some interest in her mother's writing. But at 16 it would seem her focus was on more interesting things to her, like dresses and shoes that she had seen at the mall that she wanted to buy. Who knows what goes on in the mind of a 16-year-old girl? When my brother told me that Claudia Hanson was keeping over $40,000 in a safe in her apartment, that was when I began to follow her around very discreetly, as a plan began to form in my head. I persuaded my brother Keegan to help me orchestrate this plan, although if the truth be told, Keegan is a bit of a buffoon, without wishing to be too unkind. My brother is the kind of fellow that draws in women like some fishermen can bring in a good haul of fish at the end of the day. Keegan may be good-looking, with the surfer boy blonde hair, tan skin, and eyes so blue they almost look piercing, but his brain doesn't exactly coordinate with his attractive veneer. That, I hasten to say, has fooled so many girls, including my own mother growing up. As far as my mother was concerned, Keegan was always her blue-eyed little boy. She doted on him, hand and foot, lavishing her undivided attention on him, giving him everything his heart desired. My brother's been rather pampered and spoiled over the years. Even my mother couldn't help herself being beguiled by his irresistibly good looks. I was the disappointment in our family, the one always getting myself into heaps of trouble with the police. My mother thought I was a bad influence on little Keegan, and when I went to jail for assault, she cut all ties with me, telling me in no uncertain terms how disgusted and revulsed she was with me. "You almost killed a man, son, because he was canoodling with your girlfriend, and I don't understand such bizarre behaviour. I do understand, of course, that it's not right to cheat on your partner, but for goodness sake, get a grip, son. You don't go attempting to kill someone because your ego's been badly bruised. I don't want you going anywhere near my Keegan ever again. You're a bad influence on him. It's pathetic what you did. And in your case, you're very lucky you didn't get charged with murder and put away in prison for life. I'm ashamed to call you my son, and if I don't ever see you again, it'll be far too soon." Since I've been out of prison, unbeknown to my mother, Keegan is sharing an apartment with me. As far as my mother knows, I'm still locked away in a prison cell, but I got out early for very good behaviour. In prison, if you keep a low profile and you keep your head down and try to remain as inconspicuous as possible, it's a good way to survive. Let's just say if my mother were remotely aware I was out and hanging around with my brother, filling his head with my warped ideas, she'd probably be giving birth to kittens by now. She's warned Keegan off me, but Keegan has always been rather bedazzled by his big brother, so I pretty much got him under my control. Keegan, how shall I put this as tactfully as I can, without being unduly unkind? Let's just say he's a little dopey, a bit of an airhead in a masculine sort of way. He's not the sharpest tool in the box, if you know what I mean. But he will be rather useful in this plan of mine. He's eager to get his hands on this $40,000 as much as I am. If push comes to shove, he'll do exactly as I say, even if he has to get slightly physical with Courtney. But I doubt that will happen. If Claudia knows what's good for her, she'll do exactly as I say, and I have a good feeling about her. I told Keegan once we got the $40,000, I would split it with him in half. If the truth be told, that is not going to happen. I'll give him $5,000 of the windfall, and that's being generous. If Keegan wasn't my brother, I'd bugger off with all the money and do a runner on him. But given he's my brother, I have a soft spot for him. I'm the mastermind behind this plan, which I'm pretty certain will work. Another thing playing a harmonious tune to my great advantage is that Claudia Hanson is the perfect person to rob. As like any mother, she's very attached to her daughter, despite their obvious differences. By the looks of things, she has no close friends. Her parents live far away in Germany, and she doesn't trust the bank's authority. And if you're looking to take advantage of someone, as far as I'm concerned, Claudia fits the bill perfectly. There she is standing on the station platform at Grand Central as predicted. She looks like she does every single day of the week. She's wearing a sensible navy skirt that comes up to above her knees, and a smart, well-fitted jacket, in a matching navy. She looks reasonably presentable. Her brown hair is tied back in a neat ponytail. I watch her opening her red leather handbag and pulling out her rather flashy cell phone. I'm quite sure she's giving her daughter a call. It won't be long when the train rolls in onto the station platform. Claudia, I'm standing on the platform at Grand Central Station, waiting for my train to come in, so I can grab my usual seat like I always do every day. Somehow, if someone does manage to get to my seat first, which has happened very rarely, I feel almost as if a joint of mine has been knocked out of place. I'm soulfully reflecting on the argument I had with my daughter Courtney when I returned home the previous afternoon. The apartment had been in such an atrocious state. Her bedroom looked like a hurricane had hit it, with gale-force winds leaving clothes distributed over chairs, the floor, and everywhere else besides. The kitchen looked as if a bomb had hit it, as my daughter had attempted to make a chocolate cake, having never baked a thing a day in her life before. So it looked as if a laboratory experiment had gone badly wrong, and canisters of very messy brown goo, formed from the cocoa powder, sugar, butter, and eggs, were rigidly sticking to the backsplashes, the countertops, and of course the kitchen floor. My daughter had treaded chocolate on the cream carpet in the hallway, and I knew that that would not be a walk in the park to get out. If that wasn't bad enough, Courtney appeared to have used every single bowl that was available in the kitchen, just to make one chocolate cake, which didn't turn out well either. The whole cake was as flat as a pancake. I was naturally angry with my daughter, especially when she expected me to come home after a hard day at work to clean up after her. That's not how it works around here. The least I would expect from Courtney is to keep the place moderately respectable. While I don't mind her attempting to teach herself how to make a chocolate cake, I didn't expect her to cause such mayhem and chaos in her wake. My daughter is on her summer holidays, so she has no excuse to be so slapdash and sloppy about things. It's not as if she's got tons of homework to worry about. She's got all the time in the world to clean up after herself. What she doesn't know is that I need this apartment to look spick and span and scrupulously clean when I leave the keys on the kitchen countertop for the landlord in the morning, because he's going to need them when he lets out the place again to somebody else. Courtney has no idea we're moving away, and that tonight we have a lot of packing up to do. There are some things I would not like to tell a tempestuous teenage girl, who would abhor the very idea of moving away from all she knows and loves. But I'm not going to miss out on an opportunity like this, where I can spend some time focusing on my writing career and abandoning the rat race of New York. And let's just say this is a dream come true in every sense of the word for me, that pretty much fell into my lap like manna from heaven, almost as if God himself had orchestrated the paths to be cleared especially for me. Ostensibly with $40,000 stashed away safely in my apartment, I've got the financial means not to have to work for a long while. If we're thrifty, of course, with our money. And by the time I've used up the funds, I'm hoping that my first book will be complete, ready to be published. You may wonder why I hadn't told my petulant teenager my plans. I was afraid of another blazing row with her. I just know how she will react if I told her this sobering news, which I've kept on the back burner for quite a while, never quite finding the right time to tell her my plans. I decided I would tell her at the very last minute that we were moving away, and I was preparing myself emotionally for the lightning strike of a very formidable temper tantrum that would leave the faint of heart with trembling knees. Let's just say Courtney can be rather unpredictable, like the weather. But when she flies into a moment of disagreeable indignation, you need to brace yourself for the discharge of unkind words that will be launched your way, like missiles from a war zone. It would seem a long-lost great-aunt on my mother's side of the family left my mother her little cottage close to a pretty town in Colorado. There are so many small towns in Colorado that most people don't know even exist. This is one of those rather ambiguous towns.
When my mother inherited the cottage called the Fox and Cat, she said I could have it, as she had no need of it. My parents both live in Germany, and are not going to be rushing back to America any time soon. It seems they really enjoy their new lives they're making for themselves in Frankfurt, and they spend their spare time travelling all around Europe, from Greece to Turkey, France and Spain. My father took early retirement, and has made enough money to never have to need to work again. It's all right for some people, isn't it?
I have no idea, sweetheart, what the cottage is like, my mother told me. This is a relative of mine. I've never met her, but she chose to leave me her cottage in her will, and it's yours if you would like it. I would be grateful if you'd actually take it off my hands. But are you sure, Mum? I asked. Absolutely certain, love. What's a cottage going to do for me while I'm living in Germany? I certainly don't want it. I don't need it either. I thought it might be the perfect writing retreat for you, to begin to follow your dream. It's about time you did something like that for yourself. Mum, you're a gem. I won't say no to this offer. I'd be a fool not to accept it. Good, I'm glad that you're going to take it off my hands. I really don't want to be burdened with so much responsibility. Not at my age, anyway. I tell you what I will do. I will contact the solicitors forthwith and get the deeds to the cottage signed over to you. I understand the place is fully furnished, and you can keep or throw anything out that you don't want. If you want to sell the place and pocket the money, be my guest. It's all up to you, sweetheart. Although, to be honest with you, I haven't got a clue what the place is worth or what it is like.
Mum, I don't know what to say. Thank you so much.
Well, it's not me you should be thanking, but that long-lost ambiguous relative down our family line. I just need to warn you, sweetheart, the place could be an absolute dump for all you know. Remember, I've never been to the cottage or even met the woman. So really it's a little hit and miss, whether it will be a desirable place to live or not. But Colorado is a magnificent part of the world, and I immediately thought it might be a nice retreat where you could focus on your writing, so to speak. How did this woman die? I asked. I understand from the solicitors she took a tumble and then died shortly afterwards. I don't know the details, I'm afraid. She was probably dreadfully old and frail. For your sake, I hope she wasn't a hoarder, so you might have a whole lot of mess that you need to deal with or throw out. When I realized that I could live in a cottage called the Fox and Cat in the Colorado countryside, which I understand is spectacularly beautiful, I was over the moon about the prospect. I really should have gone to Colorado and checked out the place, but my eagerness to move meant I was driven by a wistful impulse, more than actually common sense. I had saved up over $40,000 in cash, which I'd placed very cautiously in my home. Although I had a little money in the bank, I didn't trust banks as far as you could throw them, and preferred to keep cash in my apartment for safety reasons. Some might believe that only old people hoard money, but they would be wrong about that. I've never trusted banks and have been stung by them and all their clandestine charges more times than I care to remember. So me and banks, let's just say, we're not the very best of friends. I had concluded that sometimes you really do have to take the bull by the horns, don't you? And just go for it. Otherwise, life can quickly pass you by, and I didn't want that to happen to me. I was desirous to become a children's author, and aspired to become a little like J.K. Rowling. But my daughter Courtney kept rudely reminding me that J.K. Rowling's story From Rags to Riches and her glittering success with her Harry Potter novels was not something that was likely to happen to me. Don't be silly, Mum. You can never be like J.K. Rowling. That woman is a legend, and you are... For a moment, my condescending daughter was caught up in her words. Whatever she had intended to say to me next, she obviously thought better about it. So maybe she did have some discretion after all, trying to spare my feelings a wee bit. But whatever she intended to say, I knew her bruising words would very lightly sting. My daughter Courtney can look like a benign teenager, but that girl has a stinger on her that would easily rival a Portuguese man of war. And I don't say that lightly by any manner of means. Like so many teenagers her age, she can be quite obnoxious, cantankerous, and downright disagreeable at the very best of times. But despite everything, I still love her. I pulled a face, pretending to be offended by her words, and said, "Why can't I be like J.K. Rowling? Are you saying all children's authors can never compete with her? Is that what you're saying?"
"Pretty much, Mum. I'm sorry, but it's true. J.K. Rowling's stories have gripped the world, haven't they? But I doubt you could make up stories like she can. You have to be one hell of a good writer, and you have to be in the right place at the right time to be recognised by a distinctive publishing house. More often people get rejected all the time. And J.K. Rowling was rejected in the beginning numerous times, I believe. That's all I'm saying, Mum. If it was so easy, don't you think other aspiring children's authors would be champing at the bit to get the same kind of notoriety, like she did? And let's not kid, luck shone down on her like a bright star from heaven, and that helps an awful lot. And then there was all the publicity concerning her books, which meant all over the world people were buying the books, and then her books were turned into movies. So is it any wonder she struck gold? Mind you, having said that, since her Harry Potter novels, she's pretty much faded into obscurity. But then again, she made her millions, so she probably never needs to write ever again. But I had heard she attempted to write some adult books, but wasn't desperately successful in doing so.
My daughter's cutting words hit me hard. That's the problem with having a feisty teenager like Courtney. She never tells me what I want to hear, but then I don't expect that anyway. She's brazen with the truth, and when it comes to my Courtney, she could knock me for 6 at times with some of the cruel words she blasts out so easily. Ostensibly, despite her very best efforts to subdue my interest and passion in writing, I have not been remotely discouraged by her, I'm glad to say. I knew I was unlikely to become J.K. Rowling, or like her in any way, but there was no reason I couldn't become an esteemed children's author of sorts, if I put my mind to it. But with my job at Lebrun, eating away at my valuable time, I haven't been able to focus on my writing. To all intents and purposes, by the time I return home, I have to unwind first, then prepare dinner, watch television with Courtney, do a few jobs around the apartment. By the time I hit my pillow, I'm out like a light. It might only take me an hour to commute to and from work both ways. But believe it or not, 2 hours does take a huge chunk out of my day. It is only while I'm sitting on the train when I can actually focus on my writing. So I began to enjoy the train rides to and from work. Sometimes when the train draws into the station, when we're supposed to disembark, I'm almost disappointed, as I'm drawn away from my make-believe world to the less than amenable hub of reality, I'm afraid. I guess you can say writing is escapism of sorts for me, where I get to become the characters I write about, which is rather like playing a part in a movie. It certainly makes my 9-to-5 life a lot less dull and infinitely more bearable. I was extremely tired of the rat race of New York City, and I'd been waiting for a perfect opportunity to resign from my job and begin anew. I knew this afternoon when I returned home, after the train ride, I would be telling my daughter Courtney to pack up her bags because we were leaving in the morning for a cottage called the Fox and Cat, that I'd never seen before in the Colorado countryside. She'd likely think I'd lost leave of my senses, but I didn't care about that. I was not sure how she was going to take my rather sobering news when I told her I'd resigned from my job at Lebrun. Even my boss, Mr. Thornby, was mortified when I told him I was leaving. And as I hadn't taken any holiday leave, so I could leave my job that very day at a moment's notice. We will miss you very much, Claudia. It goes without saying that you have been an asset to this company. I, for one, will be very sorry to lose you. He paused for a brief moment, rubbing his chin reflectively, that looked like it was spattered with silver dust from the beard he'd been attempting to grow for the last year or so, with very little success. Why some men who can't grow beards try to do this, I honestly don't know. Is this what I think it is, Claudia? He asked me, raising a silver brow above his steely grey eyes. I will say this about Mr. Thornby. He had very attractive eyes. Yes, Mr. Thornby, I just want to give my writing career a chance. I've saved up enough money to give me a bit of a head start. Good on you, Claudia. I'm proud of you. That's what I've always admired about you. You're not afraid to plunge into the deep end, even if you have to swim with the sharks. Just so you know, if things should go pear-shaped for you, which I sincerely hope on your behalf that they won't, there will always be a job waiting for you here at Lebrun. If, however, you do become a world-famous writer like J.K. Rowling one day, I would very much like your autograph. That is so kind of you to say, Mr. Thornby. I don't know what to say. And as for being a success story like J.K. Rowling, I don't think so. But I want to give my writing my all. But you're so kind, Mr. Thornby, offering me my job back in the future. I do appreciate the security that offers me. It's nothing to do with kindness, Claudia. They don't make people like you anymore. You're one of the most dedicated people on my team, and it's going to be impossible to replace you. Thank you, Mr. Thornby. I do appreciate that. As I stood there rather stoically on the platform at Grand Central, I pulled out my cell phone from my red leather handbag and gave my daughter Courtney a phone call. I wanted to clear the air with my daughter. She had thrown such a formidable tantrum when I'd insisted she cleaned up all the chocolate cake mix she'd managed to get over everything. She hadn't been best pleased to scrub up after herself, and had slammed the door to her bedroom behind herself after she'd completed the job for me. She refused to have anything to do with me for the rest of the entire evening. It's amazing how a teenager can make her mess seem like all your fault. "What?" came my belligerent daughter's voice at the end of the line. "What is it, Mum? Are you checking up on me? To see that I haven't put cake mix all over your perfect kitchen countertops? Is that it?" "Don't be like that, Courtney. It's not necessary. It really isn't." "Don't be like what, Mum?" "Indignant with me. I think it was very reasonable of me asking you to clear up after yourself in the circumstances, don't you think? When I cook, I always clean up after myself, and you should do the same." "Well, bully for you, Mum. We can't all be as perfect as you, can we?" "Look, Courtney, is it really necessary to be so angry? I mean, honestly, you're holding on to such anger, and it's not doing you any good. Can't we move on from this, love? I phoned you to make peace with you, if you must know. I was thinking I might pick up a takeaway for you for dinner tonight, when I return to the apartment. Something from Chick-fil-A, perhaps, or Taco Bell, or even Wendy's, if you like. And there is that good Chinese place you rather like. Would you like me to go there for you, perhaps? What would you like, sweetheart? I'd like to spoil you this evening." "You want to spoil me, do you, Mum? That's rich coming from you. You think buying a takeaway is going to make everything better, do you? Forget it, Mum. Get what you like." At that, my daughter slammed down the phone on me. I can't say I was surprised. I kind of anticipated that kind of reaction from her. I sighed in exasperation as I slipped my cell phone back into my leather handbag. Why was it that I was made to feel like I had wronged my daughter and needed to apologize for something that was entirely her fault? Teenagers always twisted things for you, so that you were made to feel like the bad guy. Was it so unreasonable for me to expect her to clean up after herself? As I was contemplating all this, at that specific moment, I'm glad to say, the train roared into the platform at Grand Central, and the doors swooshed open. I clicked into gear at once, hurriedly making my way to my usual seat, with its fixed table, where I intended to get caught up in my writing once again. Now I was comfortably seated, so I removed my laptop from my large red leather handbag and put it on the table and began to tap away at the computer. I was so completely absorbed in my writing that I didn't notice the stranger slipping into the seat opposite me. The train soon chugged away very happily as it left Grand Central, and that was when I heard the stranger's voice, interrupting my train of thought. "Do I know you from somewhere?" he asked me. "You look awfully familiar." I realized the man was talking to me, I will admit I felt a tad annoyed that the stranger opposite me was engaging in conversation. Could he not see I was focused on my work? What was wrong with him? Was he trying to pick me up or something? If that was indeed the case, I was not biting into his bait. I wasn't remotely interested in having a relationship with anyone. I was still scared off from my last boyfriend that had robbed me blind. I looked up at him cautiously, giving him a watery smile. You've probably mistaken me for someone else, I'm afraid. Let's just say a lot of women my age look rather like me, I expect. The stranger bobbed his head to one side, shaking his head vigorously. You don't give yourself credit. Your looks are very distinctive. You easily stand out from any crowd. He paused for a brief moment and then nodded his head furiously. Yes, that's it. I know. I'm pretty sure I've seen you at the Blue Witch coffee shop before. Yes, that's where I've seen you. Well, I do go to that coffee shop rather regularly, I admitted, feeling absolutely certain that this man was obviously trying to pick me up. The stranger gave me a warm, very genuine smile. I was struck by how extremely good-looking he was, but I wasn't going to allow that to distract me from my writing. I had bigger fish to fry. In the morning, me and my daughter Courtney would be moving to Colorado. I just needed to get back to the apartment, and after I picked up a takeaway from somewhere, we'd get our bags all packed. Luckily, the apartment that I rented from a very amenable landlord was fully furnished. Me and Courtney didn't own a ton of stuff, I'm glad to say. We had never been hoarders, so my large SUV would be big enough to contain all our worldly possessions for just one trip to Colorado. What are you writing? The stranger asked me. I hope you don't mind me inquiring, but I'm rather curious. You seem incredibly focused on the job at hand. Oh, you know, I said nonchalantly. Stuff from work. I don't believe that for a single second, said the stranger. You're pulling the fast one on me. If you were doing stuff from work, you'd never be that driven or focused. My guess is you're writing a book. You're an aspiring author, and hoping that one day your work shall be published. Am I right, or am I right? He said with a cocky air of smugness on his face. His off-the-cuff random remarks left me completely bewildered, as you can imagine. In the way you would be if you went to the grocery store, and the supermarket teller you didn't know from a bar of soap started telling you things about yourself they couldn't possibly know. I looked up at the stranger, confounded. How could he know all this from observing me writing away on my computer laptop, that I was writing a novel? How can you know this? I asked, looking up at the man from my laptop rather curiously. The man chuckled. He looked amused and seemed happy to have my undivided attention. It's called being observant. So I take it I'm right. You are writing a book, then? Well, I'm trying to write a book, I admitted. When I can find the time in my busy schedule, that is. Do you mind me asking, ma'am, how many words have you written so far? He asked me. About 60,000, I said. The man whistled. That's impressive. If you're so astute, I challenged him, what do you think I'm writing about? I almost regretted having said this, because I didn't want to open a dialogue with this man. Now I was giving him carte blanche to talk to me the entire journey, and I really wanted to focus on my work. Let's see, shall I? Said the man. I watched as he put a hand on his head. I noticed his blonde hair was shaved on the sides, and in the middle had been made to look quite spiky. He acted like he was thinking about my question long and hard. His dramatic gesture made me smile. He was never going to guess. I was desirous to become an aspiring children's author. If he got that right, I'd probably eat my seat, let alone my hat if I actually had one with me. Well, I think you're too driven to be a romantic type. So you're not writing a romantic novel, he said. If you were, your clothes would be a lot more bohemian. Your hair would be loose and carefree, and not tied back in a neat ponytail like it is right now. Could you be writing a crime novel or a thriller? The man once again massaged his long lean fingers through the spikes on the top of his head, as if once again he was lost in thought. No, you're not writing a crime thriller. Definitely not a crime thriller. I'm not? I inquired. Why do you say that so confidently? No, you're not. Nor are you writing a horror like a Stephen King book. You don't look the type. Well, I didn't know there was a type, I said. What am I supposed to look like if I write a horror? Am I supposed to be covered in tattoos and look as if I'm a goth? Is that what you think? You look very sensible. Too sensible to be a horror writer. Look at the way you're dressed, for example. Very businesslike and practical in that navy blue suit of yours. A horror writer wouldn't dress like that. They would probably have tattoos and ear piercings, that's for sure, and maybe wear a lot of black in their wardrobe. What was this man talking about, I wondered. Maybe there was method to his madness. What he said next took me aback. Then, of course, there's the world of children's fiction, isn't there? The man studied me as if he was reading me like an open book. I held my breath very cautiously, and then he said, "Yes, that's it. You're an aspiring children's author. You fancy yourself as the next wannabe J.K. Rowling. You're trying to follow in her footsteps. Am I right or am I right?" He said, looking as triumphant as if he'd got the dart in the bullseye. I stared at him incredulously. Was this man psychic or something? I was so incredibly amazed by his revelation that I'd forgotten all about my work that was spread out before me. "You're right," I admitted. "I want to be a children's writer. But being like J.K. Rowling, well, that's a big stretch. But I guess I can dream, can't I? Honestly, I don't know how you could know all this. I'm incredibly impressed." "Well," said the man, "I told you if you watch people enough, you glean things about them, don't you?" "I'm not sure you do, you know," I said. "I think you may have some psychic abilities to be able to guess so accurately. Can you guess my name, perhaps?" I challenged him. "Now, I bet you'll never get that right, and I certainly don't expect you to." The man grinned. "You want to catch me out, is that it?" "Pretty much," I said cheekily. "Let's just say I'm reasonably confident you'll never guess my first name." "Well, you've got to give me a clue, haven't you? Is it a common name or is it unusual?" "No, it's not common, but I wouldn't say it's an unusual name either. Having said that, I did not know anyone when I was at school who had my name." "All right, I'll try to guess," said the stranger. "You're definitely not Brittany or Rachel. You're not a Monica or a Bronwyn." I grinned at him. "No, I'm none of those names, I will admit." "I think your name begins with a C. Yes, that's it. It definitely begins with a C. No, you're not Cindy. You can't be Cindy. You're not a Cindy. Let's see. You're not a Caroline or a Kathy. I think you might be a Claudia," said the man. "You know what?" he said, wagging a finger at me. "You're definitely a Claudia. That's it." I was speechless. My blood ran cold. How could the stranger possibly know my name? Was it really random luck that he had guessed it like that? And that I was writing a children's book? How could he possibly know these things, especially my name? Have you been spying on me by any chance? How can you possibly get my name so accurate? Yes, my name is Claudia, as it happens. The man tapped his nose. "You could say I just know things. I bet I can guess your daughter's name as well. Let's see. I think her name also begins with a C like yours does. Now, she's not a Kathy. She's not a Cindy. No, she would be a Courtney, and my bet is she's probably 16 years old. Am I right or am I right?" he said again very smugly, so much so that I wanted to lean forwards and slap him across the face. I felt so incredibly annoyed. "Who are you?" I asked the man, my whole body now trembling with trepidation. I didn't like where this conversation was going. There was something insidious about this man, as if the cracks beneath his attractive veneer were finally beginning to reveal themselves to me. There was a very inauspicious side to his personality. I could see that clearly. I was tempted to pick up my laptop and venture down the carriageway of the train to find somewhere else to sit. This stranger was giving me an unfortunate attack of the heebie-jeebies, and even my stomach was beginning to spasm and recoil in discomfort. "My name is Ozzy," he told me, and then he paused and looked at his cell phone. He leaned over to show me his cell phone. "I want you to look at my cell phone closely, at the photograph on it. Look at the woman in the picture, will you? I've got a good feeling you will recognize her rather well." I snatched the man's cell phone from him, staring in at the picture. Two people were lying on a bed together, cradled in each other's arms. And that was when I realized one of the people was my daughter, Courtney. When I realized I was staring at a picture of my daughter in a young teenager's arms, I felt as if the ground beneath me was going to slip away, and my heart became completely hollow. It began to boom loudly in my chest, so much so that I could barely hear the sound of my own voice. "Where on earth did you get this footage from?" I demanded the man tell me, after almost dropping his cell phone onto the floor of the train, where it landed with a mighty crash, but thankfully didn't break. "Careful," said the man, reaching down to the floor to retrieve his phone. "These things are expensive to replace, you know." I stared at the man, my mouth hanging open so wide, my eyes becoming the size of saucers. What on earth was going on here? I didn't understand any of this. Why was my daughter Courtney lying in a teenager's arms? And more to the point, how was it remotely possible a stranger I met on the train, calling himself Ozzy, happened to be in possession of footage of my daughter Courtney? Something very strange was going on here, and I didn't like it at all. I felt as if I'd been dragged, kicking and screaming, into a nightmare I wanted no part of. The man, calling himself Ozzy, leaned forward and spoke in a muted but warning voice. The laughter in his eyes had all but faded away. They had become cold and very hard, as if any former light I'd ever seen in them had finally been expunged. "Now I want you to listen to me, Claudia. Hard and good. Do you understand? Your daughter is in your apartment with my brother Keegan. You can see him there in the picture. She's been restrained and tied up by my brother. He's a very bad man, a dangerous man, and he will happily kill your daughter if you don't do exactly as I say. If you think of calling the police, even for a second, at any point in time, before you arrive back at your apartment, your daughter is as good as dead, and we don't want that, do we, Claudia? So I need you to listen to me very carefully and cooperate. Is that understood?" I nodded. "Please, I'm begging you, don't hurt my daughter. Please don't hurt her. She's my baby." "If you do what I say, Claudia, then everything will go swimmingly for you. And when you get back to your apartment, your daughter will be intact. But if you mess with me and my brother, you'll find your daughter's body parts lying spewed all over your apartment. Because my brother is, well, let's just say, a very aggressive, violent man," he tutted. "If he gets upset, there is no telling what he's capable of doing. When he gets angry, let's just say a cantankerous rhino has absolutely nothing on him. Do you get what I'm saying, Claudia?" I cupped my hands over my mouth and cried out in terror. "No, no! Please don't you let him touch him. Don't you let him hurt her. I'm begging you. What do you want from me?" I asked. "I'll get you anything you want, if you promise me not to hurt my girl. She's only 16. "Shush! Don't you dare speak loudly to draw attention to yourself, because if you start playing any games, lady, you're going to be very sorry. Do you understand?" said Ozzy, stiffly examining the carriage to check that nobody was watching us. People were so caught up in their cell phones, they paid me and Ozzy no heed. If they had done so, they might have thought we were a couple engaging in a squabble, and that had happened many times on these train journeys. So I imagine any noisy outburst would not really strike anyone as particularly unusual. Ozzy hissed like a poisonous viper, glaring at me in extreme indignation. You need to be quiet, Claudia, he warned. All I want from you is the combination of your safe. I understand from my brother Keegan. Your daughter says you keep $40,000 in your safe. So I want all the money. Now you know exactly where I'm going with this, don't you? He said, cocking his eyebrow and giving me one of his steely gazes. He was clearly thoroughly enjoying holding me to ransom like this. Why are you doing this to me? I don't understand. What have I ever done to you? Why would you want to hurt me and my daughter Courtney? I never said I wanted to hurt you or your daughter Courtney. What do you take me for? I'm not a monster, Claudia. Neither is my brother. But if he's provoked, there is no telling of what he is capable of doing. This is not personal. Just like any other man, I want to make money, and $40,000 will be a good innings after a stint in prison for grievous bodily assault, and some might say attempted murder. If I hadn't been arrested, I would have probably killed the bugger, without any problems at all. And once you've almost killed one man, it's not hard to start killing another. And you're telling me this for what exactly? Why are you telling me this? Why do you think I'm telling you this, Claudia? Isn't it blindingly obvious? To let you know exactly who you're dealing with. If you mess around with me, or play any silly games, or even dare call the police, even after this nice little transaction of ours is complete. I've got some nasty friends out there, Claudia, all who've been in prison themselves, and some of these men owe me a big, big favour. And believe it or not, I will call it in if I'm ever arrested. These are the kind of unsavoury people that can make somebody's tragic death look like a dreadful accident. So if you do dare go to the police, Claudia, after you've given me the combination for your safe and we've extracted all the money, you will find your days left on this earth will be numbered. We can't have that, can we? I spat at the man contemptuously, glaring at him furiously. You are a monster. Can't you earn a decent day's living like any normal person? Why do you have to exploit people like me and my daughter? What have we ever done to you? I worked damn hard for all that money so that I could make a life for myself. Have you got no shame? No, I don't have shame, Claudia. It's a luxury I can't afford. Like you, I'm doing a hard day's work. It's been very tiresome, believe it or not, following you around for 2 weeks, getting to know you a little better. And I have to say this, Claudia, you don't exactly have the most inspiring life, commuting to the Big Apple every single day. I almost feel sorry for you. But then again, I've never been awfully sentimental. At least I work honestly for a living. You wouldn't know the meaning of being honest if it hit you in the face. You should try it sometime. It feels good to live a life of integrity, and at least I can sleep at night. The man ignored my remarks and began to tap into his cell phone efficiently. I'm calling my brother now. He's at the apartment right now with your daughter, waiting on my call, so he can get to the money. So you're going to give me the combination to your safe, are you not, Claudia? I'm sure your daughter's life means much more to you than $40,000. That's a pitiful amount of money in the grand scheme of things. I'll give you the number as long as you don't hurt my daughter. But what I want to know is how on earth do you know about the money in my safe in the first place? Ozzy let out a big chuckle. Oh, didn't I tell you, Claudia? Dear me, I thought I did, said Ozzy, letting out a big chuckle. A little birdie who happens to be your daughter Courtney was tweeting a little too much, wasn't she? Turned out she couldn't keep that big gob of hers shut, and was spilling all her secrets to my brother. Apparently she resents you for not giving her cash to go off and have a good time at the mall. Even she wants to break into that safe of yours to extract a bit of cash. She told my brother Keegan that you keep $40,000 stashed away in a safe. And when he heard that, well, he wasn't going to walk away, was he? Not when he knew that $40,000 could be gained from getting a little familiar with Courtney. And to think the poor little mite thought my brother was in love with her. Oh, you are disgusting, really disgusting, demeaning my daughter like this, and getting your brother to use her so unkindly. I almost feel sorry for your daughter, Claudia, being taken in by my brother like that. But then again, look at his photograph. I mean, can you blame your callow daughter for falling for him so hard? The girls all swoon over him, like bees around a honey pot. It's pathetic, really. My brother's got film star looks, but sadly he's not as savvy as I am. If you want to blame anyone for the pickle you find yourself entangled in, you can blame your daughter Courtney. She's the one that opened this can of worms for us. And I'm not going to close that can for a second. We might as well indulge and make the most of it. I stared at Ozzy with gog eyes, and as I looked at him, I began to wonder how I could ever fleetingly have found him even remotely attractive. Suddenly in my vision, he became the ugliest, most grotesque man I have ever had the privilege to meet. He definitely was a monster as far as I was concerned. I could easily imagine him going to prison for grievous bodily assault. That made perfect sense to me. This man could not be trusted an inch, and I doubted he'd ever done an honest day's work in his entire life. The man pitied me for going to work every day, to bring at home an honest wage, whereas he thoroughly enjoyed robbing people blind. That was very clear. Did he have absolutely no conscience? How did he get to sleep at night, I wondered. I absolutely believed him that he'd spent a stint in prison, and if his brother was anything like him, then my daughter was potentially in grievous danger. How on earth had she found herself entangled with such a dreadful young teenager, who was obviously about 2 years older than her? I had spoken to her at great length about not getting involved with any boys, but obviously she had refused to listen to me, which was so typical. Of course, I knew the answer to my question. My daughter loved the surfer boy look. She had posters on her bedroom walls of young celebrities that didn't look much different from this Keegan fellow that she was dating. I didn't know how dangerous Keegan could potentially be, but I was certainly not prepared to take any risks as far as my daughter was concerned. I knew that I had to cooperate with Ozzy, and furthermore, I would not be going to the police to report the robbery, even after the man had acquired his ill-gotten gains. A man like Ozzy was clearly a violent thug, and I wasn't going to throw our lives away over $40,000. No amount of money was worth it. All I cared about is that me and my daughter Courtney got out of this mess in one piece. I would never forgive myself if anything bad were to happen to her.
Courtney. I was 16 years old when Keegan came into my life. It was the summer holidays, and I was at the shopping mall at the time, with as usual no money to my name, as my very thrifty, financially savvy mother wasn't exactly generous with my allowance, so I didn't have available funds to splash out on myself. It made me mad, because my mother was sitting on a sizable fortune, $40,000 to be exact, in a safe that she kept at the apartment. Money she'd saved up for a day when she could give up working and focus on her writing career. I had tried in vain to access that safe, in the hope I might pinch a little money for myself, without her knowing about it. But I had tried every combination I could think of, from birth dates to anniversaries, and nothing had worked. I resigned myself to the fact that I'd be pitifully poor all summer long, unlike so many of my girlfriends who had such cool parents that lavished them with generous amounts of money, and gave them whopping allowances. My mother, on the other hand, thought that such parents were being ridiculous. I thought they were not. Furthermore, they took their children away on enviable holidays, while I was left feeling like the odd one out, that was spending my summer holidays at home. How boring is that? I was buying an ice cream for myself at the mall, and diving enthusiastically into a raspberry ripple, and that was when I spotted Keegan for the first time. I saw him standing outside the sports shop, scanning the athletic shoes on display. But everything in that designer sports shop always came with a hefty price tag, where the shoes you bought from there were a zillion times the price of regular shoes you could buy anywhere else. I always happened to notice that the people that went into that shop looked like they were rarely minted. Even the handbags they carried seemed to be lined with gold bullion, and I'm not exaggerating about that. I had been recently reading a teenage magazine, advising girls to take some initiative if they saw a boy they liked. Keegan, for me, ticked all the boxes of the kind of boy worth risking approaching, because he was absolutely gorgeous in every sense of the word. If he rejected me, what did I actually have to lose? Nothing, really. I had posters on my wall at home that reminded me of Keegan, young teenagers like myself, on surfboards riding waves that are taller than your average house. Did I have the brazen courage to go up to a perfect stranger like this, I wondered? What I did next was the boldest, most courageous thing I've ever done in my life. I walked over to Keegan and stood beside him at the display window of the shop, pretending also to admire the shoes on offer. That was a rather pathetic excuse, I suppose, to make conversation with him, but it appeared to have worked. "Look at those boots," I pointed out. "How can they put such a hefty price tag on them? It's daylight robbery, if you ask me. My guess is you have to be a celebrity to shop in a place like this." Keegan looked up at me, flashing me a huge smile, and I melted on the spot. Close up, he was even more handsome than I had believed him to be from a distance. "I rarely like the shoes in this shop, I'm afraid. I do have very expensive taste, and an eye for quality things," he admitted. "Especially those brown boots over there. You see them, the ones with the red laces?" "Oh, yes, they're lovely. I can see why you like them. They're incredibly trendy, and I think they'd look great on you." "But you're right. You do need to make a lot of money to shop in a place like this. But I suppose I can dream. Let's just say I'm a bit skint at the moment, but not too skint to buy you another one of those ice creams you're eating. If you're interested, of course," he asked me, looking me up and down appreciatively. I knew I was looking good today, wearing my trendy jeans with their diamante decoration around the waist and pockets, and a pretty top that exposed a very lean midriff. "I would be mad to turn down an ice cream with you," I chuckled. "My name's Courtney, by the way. And you are?" "My name's Keegan. Keegan Bryce," he said, giving me a wink. Without hesitation, Keegan took my hand in his, and we trundled off to the ice cream parlour to select some ice cream. I went for strawberry and chocolate with sprinkles, while Keegan chose the salted caramel. Before I knew it, I'd invited Keegan back to my mother's apartment, as with not much money at our disposal, there wasn't much to do at the mall, so hanging around there would be pretty lame. From thenceforth our romance seemed to blossom. We began to see each other regularly, so my boring summer holidays were now not looking so long-winded and so laboriously drudgerous as I had anticipated they would likely be. I was exceedingly proud of myself for having the boldness and courage to go up to Keegan at the mall, or my holidays would have been lonely indeed, with all my friends away in exotic locations. If my mother had the remotest idea that I was messing around with an 18-year-old teenager, let's just say she would do her nut. But what she didn't know would never ever hurt her. Ostensibly, if my mother was a little more generous with her money, maybe I'd be on holiday with some of those girlfriends of mine, being supervised by their parents. So if I was bringing home stray boys to the apartment that my mother wasn't remotely aware about, then as far as I was concerned, it was all her fault. I really liked Keegan an awful lot, and he was the first boy who ever told me he loved me, so that was a big deal. I considered us to be in a serious relationship, but I was soon to realize that he had no interest in me whatsoever, and that he was only using me to get into my mother's safe so that he could steal the $40,000 it contained. When I learnt that, it was a brutal, cold, hard slap to my face that made my self-esteem take a huge tumble, as if I'd fallen down a moving escalator and hit the floor with a mighty crash. As such was the humiliation and shame I experienced. It was on one assuming afternoon that Keegan rocked up at my apartment unannounced. I had seen him earlier on in the morning, but he was back again. I was rather flustered about this, as my mother was due to return home in the next couple of hours, and Keegan knew the rules so he needed to make himself scarce before my mother returned home from New York. So what on earth was he doing here so late in the afternoon? I opened the door to Keegan rather gingerly, frowning at him. "What are you doing here?" I practically hissed. "You do realise the time? Why are you here? You were here this morning."
"You don't look best pleased to see me,"
said Keegan, looking like an injured puppy dog that had been thrown to the curb by an obnoxious owner. I made a face. "Well, of course I'm pleased to see you, but I saw you 3 hours ago, didn't I? And your timing is really off. I may remind you that my mother will be back home in the next couple of hours or so. You're choosing to come to see me now. It's a bit late in the day, is it not? I told you, if my mother knew I was seeing you, she would throw a tantrum, let me tell you that."
"But I missed you, babe, so very much,"
said Keegan, giving me a big sloppy kiss on the cheek. And when he said this so tenderly and looked at me through his irresistible blue eyes, I'm afraid I melted like chocolate over scoops of very cold vanilla ice cream. "You did?" I asked, my heart pounding excitedly, because in my experience Keegan was somewhat reticent about expressing his emotions towards me. So being so romantic like this was a turn-up for the books, and what girl doesn't like to be told that she's been missed? "Of course I missed you," I said, "but I did see you 3 hours ago."
"Let me come in for a little bit. I promise you I'll go before your mother returns, but I just wanted to see you again. I couldn't get you off my mind."
I opened the door, and Keegan entered my mother's apartment, with a sports bag slumped over his shoulders, that made me assume he'd gone to the gym. He took me into his arms lovingly, and gave me a big, bare, affectionate hug. And then he told me he had a surprise for me, and I was to close my eyes because he was going to blindfold me for a brief moment. I giggled in surprise. "You've got a surprise for me? That's so cool! What is it?" I grinned, feeling suddenly terribly enthusiastic that Keegan had obviously brought me a gift of some kind. He must really, really like me in the circumstances, I thought.
"It's a very nice surprise, Courtney. You're going to absolutely love it. But first I have to blindfold you so you don't see it, because I don't want to spoil the surprise. I want to see your reaction when you see what I've planned for you."
I allowed Keegan to put a scarf around my eyes, so I couldn't see a single thing. I felt exhilarated, as being blindfolded was very exciting. "What are you doing exactly? What are you doing?" I chuckled, thinking he was playing some kind of kinky game with me. He led me to my bedroom blindfolded, and asked me to lie back on my bed. And then, to my astonishment, he began to tie my arms to the bedposts, and kept saying,
"You're going to love this, babe. I'm telling you, you're going to love this."
And I believed him. By this point I was giggling like a silly schoolgirl who's got a crush on one of the male teachers. "You really are a naughty boy," I said, as he pulled the blindfold off me, and I smiled up at him as I realised my hands were both tied to the bedpost, so that if Keegan didn't untie me, I'd be trapped here, and knowing this at that time felt rather exciting. This was fun, I thought. No one had ever tied me up before, and I always thought Keegan was too soft to play games like this. He was obviously a lot more adventurous than I'd ever imagined him to be. I was seeing a passionate, rather kinky side to his character that he'd kept well concealed from me, which, although unorthodox, I was beginning to quite like. Wait until I told my friends all about this. I could almost imagine their shocked responses. "Oh my God, he tied you up! Oh, that's so cool!" I would go into detailed accounts of what Keegan had done to me, and my girlfriends would stare at me with wide, bewildered eyes, and suddenly their fancy exotic holiday would look rather dull compared to the adventurous time I'd spent with Keegan in the apartment. "So where is this surprise you're talking about, Keegan?" I asked. "What are you going to do to me now?" I teased. "Look at me. I'm helpless, completely defenceless. I'm at your mercy, Keegan," I said, making an exaggerated face. Keegan did not laugh. His eyes went all smouldery. And that was when I realised this game he'd been playing with me was not so benign after all. There was no twinkle in his eyes, and a serious look seemed to emerge across his face, rather like a dark thundercloud rolling across a perfectly blue sky, leaving you in no uncertain doubt that a storm is brewing. I knew something was certainly amiss, and I could feel it in every fibre of my being, like a muscle you've pulled very hard that begins to hurt badly. What was going on here? Something was seriously off. I could taste the nausea welling up in the back of my throat, and suddenly I felt as if I wanted to be violently sick and throw out the contents of my stomach.
"I'm sorry, babe," he said. "It's been fun messing around with you. But I'm afraid I've only been using you all this time. It's nothing personal, but it was fun while it lasted, was it not?"
Is this some kind of warped sick joke, Keegan? Because if it is, I'm not laughing, I said.
"Why would I joke about something like this, Courtney? I'm being deadly serious. Do you really think I'd be interested in you? You're 2 years younger than me. Personally, I prefer girls my age or a little older."
"This isn't funny, Keegan. I don't know what you think you're doing," I said, rattling the bedpost frantically and trying desperately to pull my hands away from the grasp of the ties that held me firmly to the post. "What is wrong with you? Why are you doing this to me? Please take these ties off me, will you, Keegan? My hands are really beginning to hurt."
"Sorry, Courtney. No can do, I'm afraid. But don't worry. When your mother gets back home, provided she does what she's told, I'm sure she will untie you when she returns from New York. Her train is due back shortly. My brother Ozzy is with her right now and has instructed her on what to do. You see, your mother's going to be a good little girl, Courtney, and behave herself. Or she might return home to find that her beloved little girl has been hurt rather badly. And she wouldn't want that, would she?"
"You wouldn't hurt me, Keegan, would you? That's not like you. As far as I'm concerned, you don't have a mean bone in your body. You're a pussycat. So why are you being like this? This is so incongruous to your personality. You're not really going to hurt me, are you?"
"That depends on how things pan out, how your mother behaves. If your mother tries to play hardball with Ozzy, well, then I might have to be forced to engage my fists with you. But I don't think your mother is a stupid woman, Courtney. I'm sure she will happily cooperate with my brother. And if she does, and things go swimmingly well, then I won't touch a hair on your head."
Keegan's cell phone rang, and he put it on loudspeaker so that I became poignantly aware that this was not a game by any manner of means.
"Keegan, it's me. Everything is sorted. Claudia is here with me now on the train. She's going to give me the number for the safe, but she wants to speak to her daughter first on this video phone, for she wants to make sure Courtney is fine. She doesn't want you to hurt her daughter. I've told her you're a very dangerous man, but as long as she does what we say, you won't touch her."
I could see my mother sitting on a seat in the train, looking at me with such a disquieted expression on her face. "Are you all right, Courtney?" she asked. "You haven't been hurt, have you? You haven't been hurt?" The video image was a bit blurry. "Ma'am, he's tied me up. He wants to take all your money. But no, he hasn't hurt me. But he says if you don't pay up, he will. But I don't believe him. He's not like that." "I don't care about the money, sweetheart. I care about you. Now don't be scared. I'm going to give Keegan the number of the safe. And then when I get back to the apartment, everything is going to be absolutely fine. They're not going to hurt us. They just want the money. That's all they want." What happened next went by in a whirl, much like one of those furious cyclones that are there one minute and gone the next, usually leaving behind them a trail of devastation. Keegan easily extracted the money from my mother's safe, which was on a shelf in the closet in the bedroom, and looked as intimidating to get in as a bank vault. I could see everything as the closet was opposite the bed. Keegan pulled away a pile of my mother's clothes that made the safe look inconspicuous, and when he tapped in the numbers, the safe opened easily. It looked like a lot more than $40,000 in the safe, and I was the first one to be so surprised. Where had my mother got all this money from? Had she robbed a bank or something? This was absolutely insane. Keegan looked up at me, unable to wipe away the grin that appeared on his face.
"It seems your mother, Courtney, has been rather economical with the truth," he said, letting out a shrill, very pleased whistle. "This is a hell of a lot of money.
Keegan looked incredibly excited and hurriedly began stuffing the money into the empty sports bag that he had brought along with him. Once he had achieved his goal, he leaned over, kissed me on the cheek rather tenderly and said, "No hard feelings, babe. I still like you because you're a sweet kid. And don't worry, I wasn't ever going to hurt you. I lied about that. And believe it or not, I've thoroughly enjoyed the time we spent together. It was fun. But you are still too young for me. Let's just say, my brother's the one that has got the violent streak in him, but I'm not like him in that way. I'm sorry I had to tie you up in the way I did, but my brother insisted I did things his way. I'm going now." And with that he sashayed out of the apartment, closing the door gently behind him, and then he was gone, and all became very silent and still. I was left feeling rather stupid, being tied to the bedpost like this. I had been so hoodwinked by Keegan. How could I ever have thought I liked him? I was angry with myself for being so deceived by Keegan and his good looks. But I knew deep down in my gut, Keegan would never have hurt me. I thought about my mother losing all the money, and it was all my fault because I couldn't keep my little trap shut. What on earth was wrong with me? Why did I have to blab to everyone about everything? A while later I could hear the door open. My mother rushed into the bedroom, and seconds later she was removing the ties from my hands, and then we embraced so happily. She held me for a long time in her arms, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Thank God you're all right. Oh, thank God you're all right." "Ma'am," I said, bursting into tears myself, "I'm so sorry about everything, and about all the money you've lost. This is all my fault. I've done this to you. I've done this to us. What was I thinking, Mum? I really like Keegan. I never told you about him, and I'm sorry about that. But all this time, he was never interested in me, Mum. It was always about your money in the safe. I shouldn't have told him about it, Mum. I'm so sorry. I really am," I said, dabbing the tears away from my cheeks. "Don't worry about a thing, love," said my mother, cradling me in her arms and rocking me back and forth as if I was a baby. She hadn't done that for a very long time. "I care about you, and that's all that matters. And I'm so glad that he didn't lay a finger on you." "Are you going to call the police, Mum?" I asked. "No, of course not. Under no circumstances am I going to do that. The man on the train calling himself Ozzy, who is Keegan's older brother, is extremely dangerous. He's the one that demanded the number for the safe, and doubtlessly engineered this whole scheme. If I went to the police, he told me he'd have some of his friends who have been in prison before try to harm us, and I absolutely believe him on that one. I gather he's been in prison for grievous bodily assault, so he can't be trusted as far as you can throw him. He's obviously not a very good person, so we cannot go to the police at all. But we need to pack up everything now and leave as quickly as we can. We're moving away." "Moving away, Mum? But why? I don't understand." "Because, sweetheart, the last thing we want is for those two men to find us. Because the money they stole from my safe was all fake. Imagine when they realize they've been duped by us. How are they going to take it? My guess is they'll be absolutely furious. Livid is closer to the word I would use. That man, Ozzy, on the train, is not going to take such a revelation lying down, believe me, I know. The man has an ego on him that would make the Empire State Building look like a splotch on the landscape. He's arrogant, opinionated, and pig-headed, and my guess is he's going to come straight after us, and by then we'll be long gone, and I don't think they'll ever have a clue where to find us." "You mean to tell me you never had $40,000 at all, and the money in your safe was counterfeit all the time? But I thought it was real." "I'm not saying that, dear. The money in the safe is counterfeit, but as it happens, I do happen to own $40,000. But it's not in the safe. Follow me," said my mother, guiding me to her bedroom. "It's over there," she said, pointing to the fake pot plant standing in the far corner of her bedroom, that I barely ever noticed these days. I was dumbfounded when my mother pulled the plant out of the styrofoam that the roots were suspended in, and then she began to remove wads of cash that were stashed at the very bottom of the plant and very well hidden. It was certainly a clever place to hide money, because it would be the last place you would ever consider looking. The house plant looked real. It had very glossy leaves. "Now this is real money, Courtney," said my mother, happily clutching the pile of notes in her hands, and looked at me with a triumphant twinkle in her eyes. "All this, Courtney, is exactly over $40,000. Isn't it a lot of money?" We both laughed and laughed, for Ozzy and Keegan had been outdone. They thought they'd got away with all our money, and how wrong they were. They'd only taken away a stash of fake money with them, and although it looked incredibly real, if they paid close attention to it, they would see it was nothing but a load of paper made to look like the real thing. My mother was getting cunningly smart in her old age, I had to admit. A woman determined not to draw the short end of the straw ever again, after her bad experience with her ex-boyfriend, who had done the dirty on her when he transferred her funds into his own bank account. My mother told me later that if you have a safe, and if you're robbed by thieves, they automatically assume your valuables are stored in a locked safe, and therefore saunter off happily with a stash of money with them that looks like the real thing, only to find out later that it was anything but. I had no idea where my mother had got such excellent quality counterfeit money from, but I felt so relieved that both Ozzy and Keegan had been outsmarted by us, and it felt really good to be the ones that had the last laugh. My mother had a fabulous plan about us moving away, and I was happy to oblige her requests. I didn't want to hang around in the apartment for a moment longer, once both men realized that they had been duped. There is no telling how they would react. I hoped they would just move on with their lives and put it behind them, and not give us a passing thought. I mean, you win some, don't you, and lose some. I hoped they would have that attitude, but I wasn't sure that they actually would. My mother had told me, in no uncertain terms, how arrogant and extremely opinionated Ozzy was, so I had a horrible feeling deep in my gut that he might try and come after us to extract his revenge. I was grateful we were moving away, and in these circumstances I put up no resistance. I was to learn we were moving to a cottage on the outskirts of a small rural town in Colorado, to a cottage called the Cat and Fox. The cottage was purchased by a woman called Maureen Fuller in 1952. I gather Maureen Fuller was a long-lost relative on my mother's side of the family, who had sadly died and left her property to my grandmother, who had signed over the deeds to my mother. I understood when Maureen Fuller purchased the cottage all those years ago, she wanted to give the cottage a name, but nothing ever came to mind. Shortly after she settled down in her new abode, she would find a fox would regularly visit the property. He became so tame that she would feed him regularly out of her own hand. And her cat, Pearlite, would also interact with the fox, and they would happily chase each other around the yard like close friends. Hence the name Fox and Cat was born. I had no idea what to expect when we drove up to the twee little whitewashed cottage that had been built in the 1800s, and it had one time been a caretaker's cottage on a large estate, but since then much of the surrounding land had become the ownership of ranchers. I thought the Fox and Cat cottage on the outside looked like something out of a whimsical fairy tale, because it was so perfect. I was worried we'd drive up to a pile of rubble, or a house so desperately dilapidated it would require a ton of work to fix it up. But imagine my surprise when I realized that we were moving into a cottage that could have been written about in a children's book, because it really was that prepossessing. The Cat and Fox cottage was happily set up against an idyllic backdrop of alpine fields, where pretty wild flowers frolicked lackadaisically under the noonday sun, splashing the world in their mesmerizing colours. There were sculptural mountains that seized the skyline with a grandiose regal deportment, so they were the first thing you saw when you woke up in the morning. I stared at them in wondrous awe. I noticed that they were shrouded by a burgeoning mist that made them look all the more dramatic, as if they hid within their mist a multitude of ancient secrets. There were a plethora of tall, lofty trees that spread out over large volumes of hilly and rather rocky countryside. Above our heads in the azure blue sky, the shrill calls from a couple of large birds that were soaring above our heads in circles gave me the distinctive feeling that I really was in the heart of the countryside. The double-story, whitewashed, cheery cottage, with its sash windows and wrap-around porch overlooked a rancher's beautiful field, richly dappled with green grass, where behind a wooden pole fence black and bay horses were grazing to their heart's content. A couple of curious horses eagerly trotted over to the fence to greet us both upon our arrival, almost as if we were old, much-beloved friends. My mother parked her SUV on a neat red brick driveway. She turned around and looked at me, with a big smile developing on her face that made her eyes appear to crinkle, so that I could see the beginning of fine lines developing. Had my poor mother aged overnight, after the stress I had put her through, I should never have opened my mouth to Keegan. What on earth was I thinking? I knew I needed to put the past behind me. This cottage was the spark of a new beginning for the both of us. "Goodness gracious me," said my mother. "I didn't expect this. I don't know about you, Courtney. I was preparing myself for the very worst. But this cottage is utterly charming, and with it overlooking a rancher's field, you could be forgiven for believing all this land is ours, without any of the demanding responsibility and upkeep it obviously entails. I can only hope the Fox and Cat cottage on the inside will be as good as on the outside. The estate agent told me we'd find the key under the doormat." For a moment I was so lost for words, as if the cat had actually caught my tongue. "It's beautiful," I whispered. "Really beautiful, Mum. Like you, I'm very surprised. I also wasn't expecting this, and I absolutely love American quarter horses, and there's so many in that field." "I know you love horses, love. Maybe if you speak to the rancher very nicely, he might let you ride one of them. I don't see why not. I've got a feeling people in these parts are very friendly. I think we're going to enjoy living here." I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as my mother gingerly opened the front door. Would we be hit by a pile of dust and a damp cloying smell? Or would we be welcomed to a hoarder's paradise with stacks of magazines and an old woman's possessions tied up in piles of plastic bags that would need to be ruthlessly discarded? The heavily built wooden front door barely even creaked when we opened it. It had been exceptionally well oiled. On the inside, the sumptuously cosy cottage was pretty close to perfect, although I will admit a thin veil of dust peppered some of the classical, timeless furnishings, probably because I imagine no one had been in the cottage for a very long time. The place was beautifully presented and very tidy. Whoever Maureen was, she was clearly extremely house-proud and had oodles of taste in regards to her style, which was certainly in keeping with the age of the cottage. But the best thing about this place was the warmth it generated, as the cottage had wide open stone fireplaces, beautiful doors that led into different rooms, and the rooms were all generously sized, and a very large kitchen that looked as if it had been remodelled in the last 10 years or so, with a very striking red range oven, polished black countertops made of granite, and a large walnut kitchen table that could easily seat over 10 people. In the far corner of the kitchen, one wall was completely devoted to the most magnificent walnut dresser that I have ever beheld. It was showing off a vast collection of the finest Wedgwood china that must have taken Maureen Fuller over a lifetime to collect. Me and my mother settled down to living in the Fox and Cat cottage extremely happily, and to our surprise there wasn't much to do to the place, beyond giving the cottage a good airing and dusting, of course. We also had to pack away some of Maureen's clothes that we found in the wardrobe, which we took to a local charity shop. Lo and behold, a week after we'd moved in, a very presumptuous black and white cat sauntered into the cottage, rubbing his head affectionately against my legs, almost as if he'd known me all his life. He began to purr furiously, and then invited himself to move in with us. I have no idea where this cat came from, but he was domesticated and very tame, with an extremely affectionate nature. We called him Wilbur. I soon became very attached to the cat. Me and my mother made friends very quickly in the small town. When people heard we'd moved into the Cat and Fox, they dropped around to see us, welcoming us with delicious dishes, like cheesy grits, cornbread, meaty casseroles and cherry pies. My mother worked hard during the day with the story she was writing, and people in town seemed pleased to learn that she was focusing on becoming an author. I eagerly explored the area around the property at leisure and began to appreciate the exquisite scenery. At 16 years old, you'd think I'd missed the malls and the boutiques sporting designer clothes back home. But much to my surprise, I did not. I had no idea that within me was a big passion for nature that was now being realized for the very first time in my life. Our immediate next-door neighbour, to the right of us, was a rancher, a man called Ed Warrenetta. He came to visit us, bringing us some of his wife's pickles, preserves and wild honey for us to enjoy, which was very good of his wife, who I understand was a flamboyant woman called Lynn, who would soon become one of my mother's very best friends. Ed Warrenetta was a very easy-going man. He assured me I was welcome to walk through the woods on his property any time I chose, and I could also ride any one of his horses if I so wished. I told him I'd taken riding lessons as a kid and knew how to ride.
Well, there you go then. I always say that it's like riding a bicycle, riding a horse. Once you've ridden a horse, you never forget how to do it. You'll be doing me a favour anyway if you ride one of the horses. I think Pie Crust will suit you fine. He's a very easy-going character.
Thank you so much, Mr. Warrenetta. I'm going to take you up on your offer.
Call me Ed, he insisted. Just pop around to the stables any time you like. You can climb under the fence if you like to take a shortcut through the fields. Tell my groom Philip that I sent you. He'll saddle you up and get Pie Crust ready for you to take out on a ride.
You have no idea what this means to me, Ed.
Oh, I think I do, Courtney. I may look like I've never been young before, but I was your age once, so I get why you love horses so much. I was passionate about them when I was your age, and I hasten to say, he chuckled, I still am. No matter how old you get, Courtney, some passions never abandon you.
Thanks to Ed Warrenetta's kindness, I would regularly ride one of his American quarter horses called Pie Crust around his extensive property. Ed made it seem like I was actually doing him a favour, when in reality it was the other way round. It was an absolute privilege to ride such a docile, easy-going and relaxed horse like Pie Crust. It would seem every time I went riding into the woods, down the pretty country trails, bespeckled with fallen leaves and twigs, under the large canopy of the tall, shady, lofty trees that weaved their branches together from a great height. Some of the trees in the wood grove were ancient, boasting massively hefty tree trunks, formidable branches, and plenty of leafy green foliage. When I began to ride Pie Crust down those trails, I would always have a profound instinctive sense that I was not alone, that something was watching me. I assured myself that such ambiguous, dark thoughts were unfounded. Nobody was there. Of course they weren't. Perhaps after being tied up by Keegan, after that rather bitter experience, I was suffering from some post-traumatic stress, which was understandable in the circumstances. I was occasionally getting the jitters for no reason at all, and that was likely to happen as a side effect of that harrowing experience that had without doubt left an indelible imprint on my life, rather like a cat print that is left behind in the wet cement, and once the cement has hardened, it isn't easily wiped away. I sometimes worried that Ozzy and Keegan would find me and my mother, and there is no telling how they would react to us once they realized that we had outsmarted them. I was worried that an unsavoury character like Ozzy would track us down. He had threatened my mother that if she messed him around, he'd get some of his thug-like friends to make our untimely deaths seem like an accident. By the sounds of things, Keegan's brother Ozzy had quite a monumental ego on him. Arrogant and opinionated men like Ozzy you needed to watch like a hawk, for there is no telling what men like that are capable of, and it certainly didn't help that he'd spent a stint in prison for grievous bodily assault. One day when I was riding Pie Crust down the country trail, the horse bolted to a sudden, immediate stop, refusing to move forwards. It was as if Pie Crust was terribly afraid that something was in our midst. "Come on, Pie Crust," I encouraged him, tapping him on the flank with the heel of my boot. "Move! Go on, move!" But Pie Crust seemed reluctant to do so, which was out of character for the very easy-going horse. That was when I observed a very obscure, indefinite figure, a dark figure that is, emerging through the trees. I was very disquieted by this sighting because I knew something was there, and it made me feel incredibly nervous. My mouth nearly dropped to the ground when I realized I was observing a female Bigfoot. I was so confounded by this idiosyncratic sighting that I rubbed my eyes numerous times, as if I was certain I was dreaming. Pyecrust naturally began to panic from this rather unorthodox encounter. He began to belligerently kick up his hooves, with so much dust being lifted up off the earthen trail, filtering into the air like a sandstorm. A strange whinny emerged from the back of his throat, the sound like that I've never heard before. And then the horse attempted to make these bucking movements, as if he wanted to break free from my hold and throw me off his back so he could gallop away from the Bigfoot. The Bigfoot stood there very still, and then made these strange horse-like noises through the back of her throat. And what happened next was completely bewildering. To my absolute astonishment, Pyecrust's demeanour completely shifted. The horse completely relaxed, and nonchalantly trotted over to the Bigfoot, with me still seated on her back. Pyecrust began to nuzzle the Bigfoot, as if they were the oldest of friends. I'm not sure why I didn't pull the reins in to stop Pyecrust from doing this, but it was as if I was caught up in a flow of which I had absolutely no control. The female Bigfoot began to stroke Pyecrust lovingly, and I was in no doubt she was communicating with the horse with an enviable efficiency. The rancher Ed, who owned the stables and who let me ride Pyecrust regularly, had actually called a horse whisperer around to his ranch recently, after purchasing a horse that failed to settle down and seemed unduly nervous all the time. This horse whisperer had worked wonders on his horse. As she told Ed, the horse was worried that she was going to be sold off yet again. But when the rancher told the horse whisperer to tell the horse that she'd be at the ranch for the rest of her life, the horse settled down to ranch life happily. It would seem the Bigfoot possessed similar abilities of telepathically being able to communicate with Pyecrust. Was I scared to be terribly close to this imposing, intimidating, lofty creature? I probably should have been, but I'm not sure if anything was circling through my mind at the time, apart from the words that this can't be happening, I have to be dreaming. It was when I realized that this was no dream, and that the Bigfoot I was seeing with my naked eyes was indeed real. And furthermore, Pyecrust really liked her, and had responded to her positively. And that is a big deal, as far as I'm concerned, because animals are very intuitive to energy fields, and can easily perceive if you mean them harm. I knew if Pyecrust trusted the Bigfoot, then so could I. I may as well not have existed as far as the Bigfoot was concerned, for she had failed to acknowledge me. I know it sounds strange, but I felt jealous that this creature's undivided attention was completely focused on Pyecrust, who was happily foraging for some leafy greens on the forest floor, and occasionally looking up lovingly at the Bigfoot through spirited brown eyes. Pyecrust appeared to have conveniently forgotten that I was actually seated on his back, and we should probably continue with our ride. I decided from my vantage point I could have a closer look at the Bigfoot, and was struck by how human she appeared to be. Her face had a human symmetry, with high cheekbones, hooded eyes, and a flat aquatic nose. Her forehead was heavily lined, but I didn't think this female Bigfoot was old at all. Her grey skin was probably weathered by the great outdoors, which would make perfect sense to me. I noticed that with the sun spilling through the canopy of the trees, the Bigfoot's dark hair in certain lights gave off a rather attractive auburn hue. She may have been about 9 foot tall, and her body Herculean in size and powerfully built. And despite her hefty proportions, she gave off a feminine energy. Around her neck she wore a leather thong of eagle's feathers. All of a sudden she looked straight up at me, and my eyes were drawn into these deep, dark chocolate pools, and I was certain in that moment she knew everything there was to know about me, almost as if she was rolling through the script of my life. I know this sounds incongruously weird, but that is what it felt like when she looked at me. That was when, to my amazement, the Bigfoot spoke to me, in a strange, rather peculiar language, and then her dark eyes became extremely sombre. All of a sudden I heard her words and their meanings in my head. Katilaki, ko talasani tua, isilikina ko, Hashakasa, hompoliti, asikatilako. You're in danger. There's a black cloud coming after you. Be very careful about that. And with that she was gone from my sight. And even a week after that strange event, I would always wake up from my sleep and think, was that a dream or did it actually happen? Let's just say when something happens to you that is so beyond the bounds of what you consider to be realistic, sometimes the easiest thing to do is to pretend it never happened at all. And that is exactly what I did, as the Bigfoot's warning words were not what I wanted to hear. Keegan's account, about 2 months after the robbery. I couldn't believe me and my brother Ozzy were driving all the way to Colorado to look for a whimsical cottage called the Fox and Cat, would you believe? Situated near one of those ambiguously obscure little towns in the middle of nowhere. You know the sort of place. I rather thought it would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. Turns out I was wrong about that. My brother could get a bee in his bonnet about things, and we were now on the hunt for Claudia and her daughter Courtney, who had escaped their comfortable little apartment hours after me and my brother had tried to rob them blind. But in the end they had the last laugh on us, as the money we thought we had acquired from our small little heist had turned out to be counterfeit after all. My brother did not like being made a fool of, and there was only one thing on his mind: murder. I recall when I met up with my brother, after having successfully robbed the cash from Claudia's safe in their apartment, and returning from the heist with a huge stash of cash in my gym bag. Well, I thought that at the time, of course. I was so hoping for my brother to acknowledge my successes, to be proud of me. I was always looking on my brother with so much awe, almost as if he was a demigod. More fool me. My mother wanted me to have nothing to do with Ozzy, as he'd gone to jail for grievous bodily assault, which could have potentially turned into murder, if the man in question had not successfully survived his very formidable injuries. When my brother came out of prison, I clandestinely decided to move into his apartment with him, against my mother's knowledge. I pathetically followed my brother around, rather like a devoted, doting puppy dog, hanging on to his every word and doing anything he asked of me. It was when I informed him that a girl I'd met at the mall called Courtney had a mother called Claudia, who kept a huge stash of cash in her apartment. Because her mother had an aversion to banks, my brother conjured up a plan to get all Claudia's money. In the beginning he began to follow Claudia around New York to gauge her every move, and when he decided she would be the ideal mark to exploit, that wouldn't go blabbing to the police, our plan rolled into action rather seamlessly, where I was to play an intrinsic part. My brother insisted that I played Courtney like a toy drum, and made her believe I was madly in love with her. It wasn't easy to pretend I was in love with her, but at that stage of my life I would have done almost anything to win my brother's approval over, and I was excited to be included in his plans. It made me feel incredibly important. I hate to say this, but Courtney, without wishing to be unkind, thought she was all grown up, when in reality she was just a little kid. I remember when I left Courtney's mother's apartment, I felt really bad that I'd tied her up to her bedpost. Having said that, I felt rather accomplished, having got away with what seemed like well over $40,000 in cash. This was one of the biggest paydays in my entire life, and I was hoping my brother would split it in half with me. I tried to imagine what I would buy with my share of the money. I already knew in the morning I'd be going to that sports shop in town, where I'd first met Courtney in the mall, to buy those really snazzy boots with the red laces that I had been drooling over for far too long. "You've got the money then, Keegan?" my brother had asked me. I grinned at him, like a big Cheshire cat from ear to ear. I felt incredibly proud of myself for grabbing all this money without any problems or complications. If it wasn't for me, I knew my brother would not have made such a big gain so shortly after coming out of prison. We had almost certainly hit pay dirt. "I've got it, and more besides," I told him. "I think there's closer to $70,000 in here, rather than just 40. Can you believe that, bro?" My brother's eyes gleamed,
They became round with delight. He slapped me enthusiastically on the back and said, "Well done! You've done good, Keegan. I'm proud of you. You really think there's over $70,000 in that bag of yours?" "I do," I said. "So it seems your girlfriend's mother, Claudia, has been keeping secrets from her daughter. Naughty, naughty girl." "It would seem so," I agreed. My brother opened the bag to inspect the money and whistled with delight, throwing notes up in the air. My heart swelled to twice its size like a sponge that has been soaked in a lot of water. The next thing I knew, my brother examined a note more closely, followed by another and another. Before I knew what was going on, he grabbed me furiously by the shoulders, dragging me against the kitchen wall in our apartment. He shook me hard and began to box my ears, and was calling me harebrained and dopey. I had brought home so much money, and he was treating me like a dog he wanted to kick to the curb. What the hell was wrong with my brother? We should be celebrating our windfall, but my brother looked as if he wanted to murder me instead. Why was he behaving like this? My brother's face had turned as red as a field of poppies, and I just knew that he was raging with anger towards me. I screamed out in pain. "Stop it, Ozzy! You're bloody hurting me!" I cried out. My brother ignored me, but glared at me furiously. Every single part of his body trembled in indignation, and for a moment I have never seen anyone look more angry in all my life. I truly thought he was going to kill me, and in a lightning strike of revelation, I realized my brother Ozzy was an extremely dangerous man, and my mother had been absolutely right in persuading me to cut all ties with him. Why hadn't I listened to her? Why was I such a fool? What was it she had said to me? "Some people are better off if they've never been born." I hate to say this to you, Keegan, but I feel that about your brother. He's not a good person. When he was little, I had to give our pets away because I didn't trust your brother with them. He would kick them, and I remember thinking if he treats animals like that, he's going to kill one of them. I think if he got married, he'd probably actually beat up his wife. You need to stay well away from him, Keegan. I'm telling you, he's not right in the head. I stared at my brother incredulously, through round, terrified eyes, feeling a very dreadful fear crippling my body with angst, the likes of such I have never experienced before. My brother had made no secret of the fact that he believed he was the one in our family, blessed with both brains and brawn, and often described me as being a very handsome dimwit, and I had wanted to show him he had got me incredibly wrong. But it seemed on this very inauspicious night I had earned some names from his rather warped vocabulary that I would rather not repeat. "Do I look bloody stupid, Keegan? Do I look stupid? Look at me!" my brother snapped, throwing the money up in the air so it fluttered about like butterflies in the wind, until it finally settled on the black and white linoleum floor like fallen confetti. "You think this is funny, do you?" he bellowed. "You think this is funny? Is this a joke to you? Some kind of game? You're a complete idiot, an imbecile, do you know that? Do you actually have a brain, you dimwit?" "I brought you a lot of money, bro, for us to share," I said. "Why are you being so angry with me? I don't understand." "You don't understand? Why am I not surprised? You never understand anything, do you, bro? You're as thick as two planks, and so incredibly dopey. Wake up, bro! Smell the coffee!" He began walking up and down the kitchen in the apartment, like a frustrated animal in a zoo enclosure. He was wringing his hands through his hair and punching the wall in the far end of the kitchen with his fists. I was relieved he wasn't actually punching me. "You are an idiot! You know that! An idiot, Keegan! Because unlike you, Keegan, the woman is cunningly shrewd. That's what she is. Pity she can't teach you some lessons in discernment. What's wrong with you, Keegan? Have you got cauliflower growing between your ears? The money is fake, and if you look at it closely you can see that very clearly. We've both been played, and let me tell you, that bitch is not going to get away with it. When I finally get my hands on the both of them, they are dead. Do you understand that? No one messes around with me like this, Especially not a woman, and gets away with it. You hear me, bro? No one! My brother had left me in the kitchen and marched over to Claudia's apartment in the early hours of the morning. No one had opened the door to him, so he'd kicked it down, and surprise, surprise, my brother discovered Claudia and her daughter had cleverly disappeared, having abandoned their apartment. He returned home looking reasonably satisfied with himself. He was wearing a very big smirk on his face, and there was fire in his eyes. I was to learn he had successfully managed to find the forwarding address of both Claudia and Courtney, as a note had been discreetly written to the landlord, asking for all mail to be redirected to a cottage in Colorado called the Fox and Cat. I couldn't help but wonder if the address was phony or fictitious, designed once again to lead us up the garden path, but I couldn't be sure about that. I knew unequivocally that in due course my outraged, overbearing brother would do his damnedest to extract his lethal revenge on these two innocent women. As far as he was concerned, they were going to pay big time for thinking they had outsmarted us. Of course, Ozzy let it be known to me, unabashedly, that had he been the one that had extracted the money from Claudia's safe, he would never have been easily duped or fooled by a pile of fake notes like I had been, because he was not stupid, which implied he thought I obviously was. He did consider that maybe Claudia had hidden a stash of notes in her apartment, in a less conspicuous place, but that was not his concern anymore. My bumptious brother didn't care about the money. He cared now about being humiliated, belittled, and fooled like this. He was prideful and contemptuous, and he wanted those two women to get what he thought they absolutely deserved. I was frightened for the two women, because my brother Ozzy, I knew, was capable of extracting his wrath on those two women. He had come close to killing me, and I'm his brother. So what would he do to those women? I couldn't even imagine. I really regretted getting involved with my brother, because in his anger I'd seen an awful side to his character that scared me half to death. Don't be angry, I begged him. Maybe Claudia did keep a large sum of fake money in her apartment, so that if she was robbed the thieves would walk away empty-handed. You have to admit she's a clever woman. Well, her cleverness is short-lived, bro, because by the time I've finished with her, she's going to really regret toying with us like this. But if I have my way, in due course she'll be pushing up the daisies. It was 2 months after the botched robbery that my brother made no mention of Claudia and Courtney any more, and I was heartily relieved by this. I was beginning to think the dust had finally settled, that my brother had thankfully moved on with his life. But no such luck. It would seem some elephants never forget, and my brother is one of them. We are going away for a few days, he informed me, on a camping trip, in a camper van I've borrowed from a friend of mine. I thought it was about time we enjoyed some good scenery, bro, together. Imagine it. We can do a lot of rambling in the countryside. We can camp under the stars. It's going to be fun. I had become increasingly distant from my brother of late, and had actually moved back into my mother's apartment. She still had no idea that my brother had been released from prison for good behaviour, as I didn't think it was in her interest to know this detail, as it would rob her of sleep at night. I was still having formidable flashbacks of tying poor Courtney to the bedpost, and I just knew that I didn't want to follow in my brother's footsteps, nor did I ever want to end up spending a stint in prison, or robbing anyone in the future. This was not a life for me. It was not worth following a life of crime. Sooner or later you would be caught, and then years of your life would be stolen from you, that you would likely spend in a prison cell, with a psychotic prison inmate for company, and a single solitary toilet. My brother Ozzy had lost all his gloss. I no longer idolized him any more. He was like a snake in the grass that had shed his skin, and now I realized what a reptile he really was. I was almost glad the money I'd raided from Claudia's apartment had all been counterfeit. At least it admonished some of my guilt. I had learnt some invaluable lessons from this experience, that I never ever wanted to repeat again. I do not know why my brother persuaded me to go on this camping trip with him. I guess for a moment he turned on the charm. He was good at that. He was so sweet to me, nauseously so, that I thought my misgivings towards him had perhaps been rather groundless. Maybe he wasn't such a bad guy after all. I mean, he had lashed out at me contemptuously on the night of the robbery 2 months prior, because he was affronted that the money I'd brought back from Claudia's apartment had all been counterfeit. I persuaded myself that despite everything, underneath it all, Ozzy was a good man. I guess I really wanted to believe that with all my heart, but a tiny little voice inside me told me otherwise. It was on our trip that my brother let slip that no, this was not really a camping trip. We were going to Colorado to find the Fox and Cat cottage, so that he could get his revenge on Claudia and Courtney. Why had I been so easily hoodwinked yet again? Was I really so ingenuously naive, so unsophisticated, that I couldn't actually see the wood for the trees? I should have realized that my brother was up to his old tricks again, and was not going to let his spiteful indignation towards Claudia and Courtney go. He was like a bear with a sore head. "Just what do you intend to do to them?" I asked him. "You're not going to hurt them, bro. Please, you can't do that. Keep your hair on, Keegan, will you? Look, bro, I want no part of this. You may want to murder 2 innocent people who rubbed you up the wrong way, but I'm not like that. I don't do things like that. It's crazy. If you carry on like this, next time you'll go to prison, Ozzy. You could be locked up for life. Do you really want that? Stop being so dramatic, Keegan, will you? Why are you so damn negative about everything? There are ways of making people's death look accidental, aren't they? Believe it or not, I learnt a few tricks in prison. So you really are going to kill them both, are you, Ozzy? Is that right? You can't do that to Courtney. The girl is only 16 years old, with her whole life ahead of her. She's a nice girl. She doesn't deserve this. And then Claudia is her mother. If you hurt her mother, Claudia will have no family left. You can't do this to 2 innocent people, all over a bit of money that turned out to be fake. That's ridiculous. You're overreacting. Overreacting? You really think I'm overreacting when those 2 women made fools out of the both of us? Those women are going to get what they both deserve. You don't have to do anything, Keegan, but you're coming with me. Do you understand? If I come with you, Ozzy, that will make me an accomplice to murder. I don't want to end up in prison, even if you do. Just drop me off here, bro. I can make my own way home. I'll go and stay at my mother's house. You started all this, Keegan. I may remind you of that. If you remember, you were the one that told me that Claudia kept $40,000 in a safe in her apartment, and you were just as eager as I was to get your hands on all that money. So don't play all sweetness with me. You're going to finish this with me, because if you don't, it won't just be Claudia and Courtney gracing a graveyard. You can join them there if you like. It's no skin off my nose. If it's any consolation to you, I'll get something nice written on your gravestone for you. He died so young, with so much to live for, it'll say. But you wouldn't do that, bro. You're my brother, I said. Well, you're not much of a brother, are you, Keegan, if you don't have my back? You're a fair-weather friend, and I don't need any of those. So are you coming with me or not? You can decide now. But I want to warn you, your decision will have consequences. I was now frightened of my brother. There was darkness in the depths of his eyes that I'd never seen before, and if I didn't do as I was told, he genuinely might end up killing me. I didn't doubt that for a second. I decided to listen to the little voice inside of me that warned me to not wind my brother up any more. I truly think if I'd provoked him any further, he really might have killed me. My mother once told me that my brother was a psychopath, devoid of any empathy, and I knew he was on meds for the condition, but never have I ever felt more afraid of my brother as I did on this tortuous journey with him to Colorado. And his Glock 20 that he carried on his person. I was always mindful could be used on me, and it's one of the most powerful handguns you can get. What a fool I had been not to listen to my mother's salient advice. She warned me once never to get involved with my brother. He's a bad person, sweetheart. I really believe he's capable of murder. At the time I thought she was being ridiculous, but now her words resounded in my head like a church bell, warning me to be extremely careful and always on my guard. Claudia, me and my daughter were watching a comedy on television. It was making me laugh so much. It was hilariously funny. All of a sudden I heard what can only be described as a crunching sound outside the kitchen window, as if someone was snooping around our property. The noise naturally made my hackles rise. That's funny, I thought, deciding I needed to investigate the noise at once. I didn't put the kitchen light on, but discreetly walked into the dark room to see if I could see anything going on outside. I very nearly screamed as I entered the kitchen, because I observed an 18-year-old teenager had climbed through the kitchen window and was standing on the sideboard. He was slipping down from the sideboard to the kitchen floor. He made gestures for me to be quiet as he pointed back at the window. I recognized the man at once from the video footage when I was on the train as my daughter's ex-boyfriend Keegan. The teenager continued to put a finger on his lips, gesturing for me to be quiet. He whispered to me, "Get out of this cottage at once. Run and hide with your daughter. You're both in mortal danger. My brother's coming in through the window after me. I think he's going to kill the both of you. He hasn't seen you yet, but you need to go now." I could hear a familiar voice outside the kitchen window, which I recognized as belonging to Ozzy. There was no doubt it was his voice. He was whispering to his brother. Keegan, is the ghost clear? Can I come in yet? Is anybody around? Can you hear any activity in the house?" Keegan answered his brother. "I think someone might be coming. Hold your horses. I heard a noise in the hallway." "Well then get back here, Keegan, now," hissed Ozzy. "We need to catch the duo by surprise. Didn't I tell you that?" I nodded at Keegan, telling him in my silent language that I understood what was going on. I wasted no time in rushing to the living room and grabbing Courtney off the couch by the hand. "What are you doing, Mum?" she asked. "I'm watching this lovely comedy." "We need to leave now," I whispered. "Ozzy is here." My daughter's eyes grew as wide as saucers. She knew what this was about, so no more words were exchanged between the both of us. We both sneakily discharged ourselves through the sliding room doors of the living room that led directly onto the wraparound porch and into the backyard. This was a journey we had to undertake on foot, as in our tumultuous, life-threatening situation, in which we had found ourselves so unfortunately entrenched, we had no time to lose at all. Time was a luxury we could ill afford. Worse still, a lifeline to any help in regards to our cell phones were upstairs in our respective bedrooms on charge. They were well beyond our reach. We had no choice but to discreetly abandon the cottage and make our way to the woods, finding the path, the quick shortcut to Rancher Eddie's farmhouse, where we would find ourselves acquiring some safety, but that seemed a long way away. It was most fortunate that my daughter Courtney knew the way down these earthen trails rather well. She was often on Ed's property, riding his horse Piecrust around the grove. But at night things were so much more menacing. It was in this pitch blackness, where all light had been temporarily expunged from the sky. With the cautiousness of two furtive cats, we gingerly ran to the wooden pole fence that separated our piece of land from Rancher Ed's property. We climbed under the fence, with hearts thundering so loudly, I was sure my heartbeat would be heard by Ozzy himself. Looking over our shoulders to ensure we were not being followed, I observed lights being switched on in every room in the cottage, as if a search was underway. I could hear Ozzy's deranged, outraged voice bellowing loudly, "Where the hell are they? They can't have got far. Me and my daughter ran like two affrighted rabbits, being pursued by a very determined coyote. An exhaustive dash was made to the congregation of trees that formed the fringe of the wood grove. At first, a very reluctant, non-compliant pearly moon hid her rather demure face behind some sweeping cloud cover. But suddenly she seemed to re-emerge again as if by magic from behind the foggy curtain, graciously offering us a smidgen of much-needed light, which was enough to help us navigate our way to the trees. I couldn't believe that Ozzy had succeeded in finding the fox and cat cottage. How had he done that? Keegan's ominous words rolled forward in my head, again and again, like the ocean waves crashing to the seashore. He's going to kill you. He's going to kill you. Oh, goodness gracious me. No, I screamed back in my own head. We're going to outsmart this man yet again. Although these encouraging thoughts of mine seemed just rather fruitless, rather like wishful thinking on my part. I could only imagine, when Keegan brought the counterfeit money back to his brother's apartment, how Ozzy had reacted, realizing he'd been artfully duped by the both of us. I had a hunch that such awful revelations would have displeased him greatly. The man had a monumental ego on him, that we had brought down successfully like a pile of dominoes. It made perfect sense to me that he was now looking to avenge us. I probably should have told him the truth, and I wish I had. I should have told him where the real money could be found, buried at the bottom of the plant pot, because being pursued like this by an absolute psychopath with murderous intent was too terrifying to even dignify with any words, and was not worth all the money in the entire world. All I cared about right now was the safety of my beloved daughter Courtney. We were out of breath when we reached the trees, looking anxiously everywhere around us, almost as if we were expecting to see Ozzy charging towards us like a rampant bull elephant in musk. But there was thankfully no sign of the two men. Once we reached the woods, the trees confiscated all that fabulous light from the moon, so that we were pretty much stuck between a rock and a hard place, as without being able to see, we were stumbling around awkwardly over rocks and burgeoning roots. And all these hidden natural traps made by Mother Nature herself were hardly friendly and could easily bring us to our knees, which had made the woods become all the more intimidating. Everything was so dreadfully dark. I could only make out the shadowy outline of the trees. Thank God we were both suitably dressed and had not changed into our PJs and were still wearing jeans and sneakers, or God knows how we would have run to the woods wearing slippers and onesies. Maybe there was a guard after all, watching over us. It was pretty cool in the wood grove, as a light wind brushed against our skins. But I never felt the biting gasps of cold air. I was overwrought with fear. I didn't even notice the mosquitoes hungrily feasting on my skin in an all-you-can-eat buffet. My heart continued to pound violently in my chest, and every single muscle in my entire body was throbbing under the burden of my all-consuming trepidation. My daughter was naturally shaking like a leaf, as we both tried to stumble around awkwardly in the darkness, desperately trying to find an appropriate hiding place, as running down the footpath in such a tenebrific oasis such as this was an extremely dangerous thing to undertake. None of the hiding places we located were at all good enough, but they'd have to do. I hadn't closed the sliding doors to our living room because I didn't want to make a noise, but they were left open, and it would be obvious to Ozzy we had made a run from it from there. He would likely guess we'd crawled under the wooden pole fencing to run to the trees in the wood grove for cover. You wouldn't have to be a rocket scientist to assume that. He would catch up with us soon enough. I was sure of that. I had a profound sense that our lives were in grievous danger, and Ozzy's intention was almost certainly to kill us. I rarely felt as if me and my daughter Courtney were being cruelly hunted, like a program I'd once watched on television called The Hunger Games. I hated that program. I now knew what it felt like to be hunted by a predator such as Ozzy. I nearly wet myself when I heard Ozzy's familiar voice, getting closer and closer, far too close for comfort. "It's obvious they're hiding around here," he said. They made a quick run for it through those sliding doors. They must have heard us when we broke into the house, but they can't have got very far in the darkness out here, unless they've got a torch with them, which I seriously doubt. They're not going to outsmart us this time, Keegan. This time we'll have the last laugh on them, and let's see how they like that. Must you do this? Came Keegan's pleading voice. You're not being reasonable, Ozzy. What did Claudia and Courtney ever do to you? Shut your face, bro, will you? How many times have we talked about this? Those two are going to pay for humiliating us the way they did. Do you have no pride, bro? No sense of self-respect? Shame on you, that's what I say. We are going to find them, and when we do... He made a joke. Fee, fi, fo, thum. I smell the blood of an American. I took my daughter's hand very silently, and we eagerly crouched behind a very bulky trunk of a tree, and we could see the bright light of Ozzy's torch piercing the dark shadows with its powerful, very abrupt, piercing, invasive light. I know you're here, Claudia, came Ozzy's voice. You're hiding here among the trees, but I'll find you soon enough. His voice was fierce. You might as well come out of your hiding places, Claudia and Courtney. Time has run out for the both of you. It's expired, I'm afraid. The clock is ticking. There's not much time left for your life on this earth. You really think I'm willing to accept being duped by the two of you without extracting my revenge? You need to be very careful, Claudia, who you play your silly little games with, because sometimes the cat you're toying with might just very well eat you alive. You two underestimated me, didn't you? You're a couple of very silly women who are going to get what's coming to you. You're going to get what you deserve tonight, and I'm going to make sure of that. Me and my daughter, who remained hiding behind the tree, squeezed each other's hands encouragingly. That was all we could do. We couldn't even see each other. My worst fears were confirmed when the light of Ozzy's torch penetrated the area upon where we were hiding. I knew in that dreadful instant our cover had been blown. Ozzy had seen us. I could hear his satisfied, victorious laugh. Gotcha! I told you couldn't get very far, Claudia. Long time no see. That was quite some train journey I had with you, was it not? Just a pity we couldn't meet on more favourable circumstances again. Me and my daughter tried to make a desperate scramble away from Ozzy, who had seen us. He focused his torchlight on us, and we began to run as fast as we could. Thankfully, Ozzy's light helped us to get ahead of ourselves, but I knew that he would soon catch up with us. He was taunting us and saying, "Tick-tock, tick-tock, the clock is running out. Run all you like, Claudia. You're not going to get very far in this dark labyrinth of trees. Wherever you choose to hide, I'll smoke you out. Tonight you and Courtney are prey, but I like my prey shooting up a lot of adrenaline. It always tastes better that way." All of a sudden it sounded as if a freight train was moving through the forest at a record speed, or a herd of thunderous bison were galloping through the trees. It was such a terrifying sound that even Ozzy's attention had been diverted away from us to the strange sound that obtrusively came our way. "What the hell is that?" he said to his brother Keegan. And before Keegan had time to answer, we heard a mighty thump of feet, a crack and a snap of a branch, and then standing before us was a powerful female Bigfoot. I could see the female Bigfoot very clearly, as the light of Ozzy's torch illuminated her conspicuously, so that every single contour of her strapping body became vividly apparent. And let's just say, you don't want to be encountering a whopping Bigfoot on a dark, inauspicious night such as this, for it can be a formidable sight indeed, that could haunt your darkest nightmares. "Bloody hell," said Ozzy. "It's a Bigfoot, Keegan. This thing is dangerous. Look at the way it's looking at us. It's going to kill us! I have to kill it first!" He was only echoing my own sentiments, of course. I wanted desperately to run away from this Herculean-sized creature, but my fear disabled my ability to move at all, almost as if every electrical impulse and firing mechanism within me that would normally persuade my legs to run had all but collapsed. The four of us were frozen to the spot. It was almost as if time stood very still. I did not know how to react to the Bigfoot. She was so powerful in every sense of the word. Ozzy was carrying a Glock 20 in his hands, but he seemed unable to press the trigger. It was as if his gun had jammed. My daughter squeezed my hand reassuringly and whispered,
"She won't hurt us. She's going to help us. I know she is."
I privately thought my daughter was completely out of her mind to suggest that this Bigfoot was benevolent, as why had it come charging at us through the trees like this, imposing more of a threat to us than even Ozzy had done, because with one swipe of her powerful hand, she'd easily be able to kill all four of us without any problem at all. My daughter, who moments before had been trembling, suddenly seemed to relax, as if her fears had dissipated. The Bigfoot was the most terrifying creature I have ever beheld. She looked so dark and threatening on such a bodeful, inauspicious night, where even the inky sky was deprived of light, as if this night could only invite the promise of imminent disaster. I could see my very life flashing before my eyes, taste the bitter nausea that began to impregnate the very back of my throat. What happened next was nothing short of extraordinary. The Bigfoot focused her undivided attention on Ozzy, almost as if she saw him as the problem. Ozzy was trembling as the Bigfoot stared him down. I noticed he'd wet himself between his legs. The Bigfoot said absolutely nothing. She stood there stoically, holding Ozzy's gaze, and try as he might, Ozzy could not look away. He was so caught up in that stare of hers. But in that moment, I knew the Bigfoot was doing something to Ozzy, to his mind, but I couldn't be sure what that was. Finally, she looked away from Ozzy, turning her attention directly to us. When she spoke to us, we miraculously understood exactly what she was saying.
"Kakilato, homanikilaso, hondilanika, hozakilatolo, shikasana." "The dark cloud came after you," she told my daughter. "I warned you it would, but I've neutralized it for you by wiping away his memory. He won't remember anything that happened to him for the last 5 years, and he won't understand what he's doing in the woods, so he's no longer imposing a threat to you. You are safe from him now. The harm he intended towards you has been destroyed." "Kilatila okolapati, asala shuko, hisana." And with that, she glided away into the grove and was gone. I was so confounded by what had just happened that for a brief moment I really thought I was caught up in an illusory dream of some sort, from which I would surely awaken. Me and my daughter could see there was something wrong with Ozzy. He looked from his brother to me and my daughter Courtney, with a bemused, rather stupefied expression on his face. "Who are these people, Keegan? Where are we? Why are we in the middle of the woods at night? I don't understand. I don't seem to remember how we got here. Why can't I remember why we got here? What are we doing here anyway?" "Oh, don't you remember us, Ozzy?" I interjected. "My name is Claudia. This is my daughter Courtney. I'm sure you know your brother Keegan." "Of course I know my brother Keegan, but I don't know the two of you. What are we doing here in the woods like this?" "You don't remember?" I asked him. "You said you wanted to go for a walk in the grove, didn't you? We said it was dark, but no, you insisted it would be fun." "I said it would be fun to go walking in the woods in the middle of the night. Are you crazy? This is not fun. Where the hell are we?" said Ozzy, looking around himself nervously. "I must have been freaking out of my mind to suggest we should go exploring the woods in the middle of the night. Where actually are we?" "You're in Colorado," I told him. Keegan realized his brother's mind had been wiped clean of any memory, so he played along with us. "Remember you wanted to come to Colorado, Ozzy," he said. "You were quite determined. You also wanted to go walking tonight.
These two ladies here invited us into the grove. They told us they'd show us around. You said you wanted to look out for owls." "I wanted to look out for owls," said Ozzy, looking befuddled. "Since when have I ever been interested in owls? I don't think I've ever been interested in birds at all, let alone owls." "You've been very interested in owls for a long time," said Keegan insistently, enjoying his brother's confusion. "I want to go home now," said Ozzy. "This is absolutely insane. I don't understand what I'm doing here. I can tell you I have no interest in owls whatsoever, and no interest in staying in these inhospitable woods. I just want to get back home. That's all I care about." Me and my daughter thanked Keegan for being on our side. He even apologized to my daughter for everything he'd done to her. "I'm so sorry I tied you up, Courtney. I'm sorry I got so greedy about all that money. I don't want to follow into a life of crime. It's just not worth it. My mother warned me that getting involved with my brother Ozzy would potentially ruin my life, and that he would be a very bad influence over me. She said he wasn't a good person, and would lightly drag me down. She wants nothing to do with him. She was right. I should never have got involved with him."
You're not like Keegan,
My daughter assured him, embracing him in a warm hug.
"I knew you weren't capable of hurting me, even when you tied me up, because it was so out of character for you."
"I can't believe we actually encountered a Bigfoot tonight," said Keegan, his eyes shining brightly. "I thought she was going to kill us. I think she knew my brother was up to no good, because she must have hypnotized him. She's wiped his memory right clean. So I think it's safe to say he won't be bothering the two of you anymore, providing, of course, his memory does not come back. But I've got a funny feeling it never will." To cut a long story short, my daughter kept in touch with Keegan for many years after the event, and he affirmed that the Bigfoot had not only successfully wiped Ozzy's memory clean for the events that had occurred in the last 5 years of his life, because even years later, he could not remember anything. He falsely assumed he was suffering from amnesia, because someone must have struck him down while he was serving his prison sentence. Ozzy decided to become a plumber, believe it or not, and was determined to live a life of integrity, as he didn't want to return to prison. It was like even his personality had done a 180, and his psychopathic tendencies had all gone. The best news of all is he rekindled his relationship with his mother, who believed her son Ozzy had undergone a personality transplant. "Going to prison was the best thing that ever happened to you, Ozzy," she told him. "It's clearly knocked some sense into you." To which Ozzy replied, "Somebody beat me in the head, Mum. I can't remember the last 5 years of my life, but there's no way I ever want to return to prison, even though I can't even remember what that was like." I have no idea what the Bigfoot actually did to Ozzy, but I do understand that Ozzy is a new man now, who even shows kindness to animals. He now owns a spaniel called Beaver, who he apparently describes as his very best friend. I've managed to have a couple of books published, and am still living happily in the Colorado countryside with my daughter Courtney. But I've not seen the female Bigfoot since, but I'm sure she's out there somewhere, but remaining elusive, unless of course she decides to show herself, which I hope she does, for I would very much like to thank her for what she did for us, for if it wasn't for her, I don't believe me or my daughter Courtney would even be alive. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. That was absolutely fabulous, and I'm so glad that Bigfoot wiped Ozzy's mind completely clean. And it seems that she did something else to him, because he was no longer that despicable psychopath he'd been before. So what an extraordinary story.
Well, hello there. I hope you enjoyed the Omnibus edition. We've got many more coming our way for you to listen to. Sending you love wherever you are in the world, in North America, Canada, Kenya, wherever you may be. I send you lots and lots of love. Thank you for listening to my Omnibus, and I really do hope you enjoyed it, because that's the whole idea about it, is to give you some interesting stories to listen to. So until next time, goodbye and good night.